Every time you close your eyes and reach backward into your own life, you believe you are retrieving something stored, some stable imprint of what truly happened. But what if memory is not a vault but a painter? What if remembering is not recovery but reconstruction? Each time you revisit the past, your mind quietly reshapes it, smoothing what was jagged, darkening what was bright, and editing out whatever no longer fits the person you've become. You don't notice the changes because the illusion is flawless. You feel certain, as if the scene has always looked this way. But certainty is the most deceptive feeling you possess. Tonight you will walk through a labyrinth where the past is not behind you, it lives inside you, unstable, shifting, reassembled every time you touch it. Here, memory is not a witness, it is an architect, and the past is its ongoing creation. You believe the past is something finished, something sealed behind you like a closed door. But the truth is more unsettling. The moment you reach for a memory, you open that door again, and nothing behind it is the same as before. The instant you try to recall what happened, your mind begins stitching together fragments, impressions, emotions, assumptions, and expectations. It builds a scene that feels whole, but is really a reconstruction. You don't retrieve the past, you recreate it. And in that recreation, pieces appear that never existed in the first place. It begins subtly. You remember the shape of a room, but the shadows fall differently. You remember someone's voice, but the tone softens or sharpens depending on who you are today. You remember a conversation, but a sentence that wounds you now seems louder, clearer, more central than it ever was. At first you think you're retrieving details, but in reality, you're inventing them. Your certainty isn't proof of accuracy. It's simply your brain protecting the illusion that you have a stable story. Memory rebuilds what never was because it must. A perfectly accurate past would be unbearable. It would lock you into versions of yourself that no longer fit. So your mind edits, trims, reshapes. It reassigns meaning to moments that once felt neutral. It alters the emotional temperature of events that shaped you. It adds soft lighting to the pain you think you've healed from, and sharp edges to the memories that justify the person you've become. When you remember a childhood moment, for example, the child you were cannot remember it with the same emotional language you have now. Yet when you revisit it, your adult mind overlays new interpretations, rewriting the experience entirely. A memory of confusion becomes a memory of betrayal. A memory of stillness becomes a memory of loneliness. A memory of noise becomes a memory of chaos. None of these interpretations existed originally. You invented them retroactively, and now they feel like they were always there. This is where the illusion deepens. Because every time you remember a memory, you don't just rebuild it in your mind. You store the rebuilt version again. The next time you recall it, you're not remembering the original moment. You're remembering the last reconstruction. Layer by layer, the past drifts away from what happened and moves closer to what you needed it to be. Every retelling becomes a renovation. Every revisit becomes a rewriting. You are editing the past the same way an artist edits their canvas, adding strokes, removing imperfections, reshaping details until they match an internal vision. But here's the most haunting part. You cannot distinguish the invented pieces from the original ones. The false fragments feel just as real as the true ones. The brain does not mark what it has fabricated. It blends real and unreal until they are indistinguishable. You're left with a story that feels complete, but is fundamentally fictional. Think of a person you once knew deeply, a friend, a parent, a lover. Think of an argument you had with them years ago. Do you remember their exact words? Or did your mind fill in the emotional blanks? Do you remember their expression? Or did the memory absorb reflections of how you feel about them now? Do you remember what happened, or what you believe must have happened because of who you perceive them to be? Each time you revisit the moment, you add something new, remove something old, sharpen something dull, blur something painful. And yet, when you describe the memory, you feel confident, unwavering, certain that this is exactly how it unfolded. Your certainty is the final trick, the brain's way of convincing you that the narrative is stable, even as it changes beneath your awareness. Memory rebuilds what never was, not because you are weak or flawed or delusional, but because you are human. The brain is not a camera. It's a storyteller. And stories evolve. They adapt. They grow to fit the present version of the narrator. When you change, your memories must change with you. If they didn't, the dissonance between who you were and who you are now would fracture you. To survive, the mind rewrites. Perhaps the person you once were needed to remember something differently, something softer. Perhaps the person you are now needs a sharper memory, one that justifies a boundary you've set, or a wound you carry, or a belief you refuse to release. Either way, the memory morphs to fit the identity you inhabit today. It is no longer a record of what happened, but a reflection of who you've become. And yet, despite all this reconstruction, you trust your memories as if they are sacred. You argue based on them. You suffer because of them. You build your identity from them. You cling to them as if they anchor you to reality. But the past you carry is not the past you lived. It is the past you created. Slowly, silently, unintentionally, every time you remembered. If you could see the original moment and compare it to the version you hold now, the differences would disturb you. Some parts would be missing. Others would be added. The emotional tone would feel unfamiliar. The meaning would be different. It would be like recognizing someone in a photograph, but noticing the face has been subtly altered, not enough to alarm you, but enough to make you wonder why it feels slightly wrong. That wrongness is not a flaw. It is the nature of memory. Every glance backward is a quiet act of invention. Every revisit is a reconstruction. Every remembered moment carries pieces of truth and pieces of imagination, merged so seamlessly you can no longer tell them apart. And yet, you continue to trust the story, because without it, you would lose the continuity of who you believe you are. Memories feel sacred because they give you identity. But identity is built on illusions, and illusions depend on memory's endless ability to rebuild what never was. You never notice the exact moment it happens. The quiet shift, the invisible adjustment, the subtle rearrangement of something you thought was fixed. It happens without warning, without sensation, without even the slightest signal that the past you rely on has just been modified. Your mind updates yesterday the way a phone updates its software while you sleep, silently, automatically, and without your permission. You wake up believing you are the same person with the same story, never realizing the story has already changed. It begins with a tiny emotional shift, so small you don't recognize it. Perhaps you feel differently today than you did yesterday. More tired, more resentful, more hopeful, more detached. Whatever the emotion is, your brain uses it as a filter. When you think back on something familiar, that emotion colors the memory. An argument that once seemed trivial now feels significant. A moment of kindness now seems suspicious. A disappointment that once stung now feels distant, softened by time. Nothing in the memory itself has changed, yet the meaning has been quietly recalibrated. You don't feel the update because the brain never alerts you. It simply incorporates the new meaning into the old narrative. And the next time you recall the event, it will already carry that updated emotional weight. You won't remember the previous version. You will only remember the new one, and you will trust it absolutely. The silence of this process is what makes it dangerous. If memory changed with a sound, a vibration, a flash, anything, you might question it. But the brain's edits happen beneath awareness. You don't hear the click of new files replacing old ones. You don't see the progress bar as yesterday is rewritten. You don't receive warnings that the past is being reinterpreted according to who you are today, not who you were then. The past updates itself quietly so that you never doubt its authenticity. Think of a moment when you misjudged someone. At first, you believed something about them with certainty. Later, you discovered you were wrong. When you revisit the memory now, it feels impossible that you ever believed the earlier version. Your mind has updated the entire sequence. Your thoughts, your emotions, your interpretations, to align with what you know now. The earlier version of the memory has been overwritten. Without noticing, you have replaced the past with something that never existed. And this updating happens constantly. Every conversation you reflect on, every decision you regret, every moment you miss, or resent, or wish you could relive, all of them are subject to silent edits. You might believe you're remembering what happened, but what you're really doing is retrieving the latest version of the internal document your mind has been quietly revising, and the revisions never stop. This is why two people can share an experience, but remember it completely differently. Each mind updates yesterday based on who the person becomes afterward. One person may grow more forgiving, and the memory softens. Another grows more bitter, and the memory sharpens. Over time, the shared event becomes two entirely separate stories, each one deeply believed, each one silently updated by the inner machinery of memory. The brain does this for survival. Without these updates, you would remain trapped in outdated emotional patterns, unable to move forward. If a painful memory stayed as raw as it originally felt, it would paralyze you. If a joyful memory stayed as bright, you would chase it forever, unable to accept that life has moved on. So your mind adjusts the emotional intensity, recalibrates the meaning, and rewrites the narrative, all without telling you. Yesterday must adapt so that today makes sense. And yet the unsettling truth remains. If your mind is always updating yesterday, then the past you cling to is never stable. The truth you return to for comfort or clarity is only the most recent edition of a story shaped by countless invisible edits. The original version is long gone. It lives only in a moment you can never access again. Think back to a moment from years ago, something you've remembered dozens, maybe hundreds of times. You feel certain you know exactly how it looked, who said what you felt, what it meant. But consider this. The memory you hold now may be nothing like the memory you created the first time you recalled it. Each revisit was an opportunity for subtle changes, emotional intrusions, interpretations bleeding into details. And now, after years of silent updates, the memory has become a polished version of something that was once raw. Yet you trust it, not because it's accurate, but because it feels complete. The completeness is the trap. It convinces you that nothing has been altered. There's a moment you've probably experienced without realizing it. You remember something and suddenly think, it wasn't as bad as I thought. Or actually maybe it was worse than I believed. Or I don't know why I used to see it that way. These thoughts feel like insights, but they are actually symptoms of silent updates. Your brain has changed, so your past must change with it. This is why people can fall out of love and reevaluate every memory with the person they once adored. Suddenly, small irritations they once ignored become glaring signs. Moments of affection become manipulations. Kindness becomes strategy. The memory updates to match the new emotional paradigm. The past reshapes itself to justify the present. This is also why nostalgia works. When you long for a time you believe was simpler or happier, you're not longing for reality. You're longing for an updated memory. Your mind has removed the discomfort, trimmed the anxiety, blurred the complexity. It has created a version of the past that fits the emotional need of the present. And because the edit is silent, you trust the illusion as if it were fact. Even trauma changes. At first, it may be too overwhelming to process. Over years, as you grow stronger, your mind updates the memory to make it more manageable. Later, if you revisit it during a vulnerable phase, the memory intensifies again. It shifts, evolves, reshapes, all depending on the emotional state of the person remembering it. The past is not behind you. It lives within you. But it never stays still. It is continuously rewritten by the silent hand of your mind, updated to match your evolving identity. Every time you change, your yesterday changes too. Not loudly, not violently, but quietly, invisibly, untraceably. Your mind updates yesterday silently, so you can keep believing a story that never stops rewriting itself. There is a moment, almost imperceptible, when you reach backward into your mind and pull on the thin thread of a memory, believing you are retrieving truth. But recollection is not retrieval, it is revision. The act of remembering does not preserve the past. It alters it. Every time you revisit an old truth, you rewrite it in ways you cannot see, cannot control, and cannot reverse. You believe you're accessing something original, something untouched, but what you're actually touching is a version shaped by every emotion, belief, and wound you've carried since the moment it first formed. It begins with a simple spark, a thought, An association, a scent, a glance, a word that reminds you of something buried. You reach for it. As it rises to the surface, it doesn't come alone. It drags pieces of your present self into it, your current fears, your current judgments, your current narratives. And without realizing it, you weave these pieces into the memory as if they've always been there. You don't recognize the intrusion because the mind blends old and new so seamlessly that the result feels authentic. Recollection is not a window to what happened. It is a mirror that reflects who you are now. Imagine remembering a moment of humiliation from your childhood. At the time, the sting may have been sharp but fleeting. Years later, as you revisit it, the child's perspective fades. The adult you are, the one who has faced loss, rejection, loneliness, disappointment, steps into the memory and adds new shades to it. The humiliation deepens. The scene becomes more painful, more significant, more defining. You begin to believe that the moment shaped you in ways it never truly did. You rewrite the emotional truth of the event, and the rewritten version becomes the one you carry forward. Old truths are fragile. They crack under the pressure of new interpretations. What you once understood as kindness may transform into manipulation. What you remembered as safety may now feel suffocating. What you once dismissed as trivial may become monumental. Recollection is not a neutral process. It is an active reconstruction driven by your evolving understanding of yourself and the world. This is why people can revisit the same event across different phases of life and find new meanings each time. The memory hasn't changed, but the person remembering it has. The truth inside the memory shifts to accommodate the present perspective. It is like rewriting a book while insisting the plot is identical. And the strangest part? You believe each new version is the real one. Every time you recall a memory, your brain rewrites it and stores the edited version again. The original is gone forever, overwritten by layers of retellings. This is why memories deepen, twist, or soften over time. The story you tell yourself becomes the truth you live with, regardless of how far it has drifted from what actually happened. Recollection doesn't rewrite old truths maliciously. It does it out of necessity. You require your past to align with the person you've become. A rigid past would create fractures in your identity. If a memory contradicts your current beliefs too strongly, your mind reshapes it until it fits. If a truth threatens the way you see someone or yourself, your mind reframes it until the threat dissolves. Old truths are reinterpreted because they must support the present narrative. Think about someone who hurt you once. Over time, you may soften the memory, convincing yourself it wasn't intentional. Or depending on your emotional needs, you may sharpen it, remembering their actions as colder and more deliberate than they truly were. You may add details that never happened, or forget details that mattered, and yet you will swear your memory is accurate. That certainty is the cruelest illusion. Recollection also rewrites truths about joy. A memory of happiness may become bittersweet after loss. A memory of love may turn sour after betrayal. A moment that once glowed may now feel dimmer, not because the event changed, but because the heart remembering it carries scars. The emotion you have now bleeds backward into the memory, staining it with meaning it never originally had. And yet, strangely, this process also protects you. Your mind rewrites old truths so you can keep living without being crushed by the weight of unfiltered reality. Painful memories soften so you can heal. Confusing ones sharpen so you can learn. Ambiguous ones restructure so you can understand. The truth bends because an unbending truth would break you. But there is a price. You can never return to the original moment. You can never know what truly happened. You can never touch the memory without altering it further. Even when you try to recall something with complete honesty, closing your eyes, breathing deeply, stripping away assumptions, you are still using the tools of the present mind to reconstruct a moment from a past self. The two will never perfectly align. The unsettling question is, what if your deepest beliefs about yourself are built on rewritten truths? Perhaps you believe you were unloved, but the original memories held more warmth than the versions you carry now. Perhaps you believe you were strong, but the original moments were more fragile than you allow yourself to admit. Perhaps you believe you were certain, but you have rewritten uncertainty into confidence. Every identity is built on recollection, and every recollection rewrites old truths, which means the person you believe yourself to be is not anchored to the past. It is anchored to a story you keep updating. And yet, this story feels unbreakable. Maybe that's the final paradox. You are shaped by memories that no longer exist in their original form. You are guided by truths that have been rewritten. You are haunted or comforted by narratives that you created unknowingly. Your past is a living document, constantly edited by the hand of recollection. And every time you look back, you rewrite it again. You think the past is stable, sealed, fixed, like a photograph preserved in a forgotten album. But every time you remember it, you touch it, and your touch changes it. The past is not an archive. It is a living material, soft and pliable, reshaping itself according to the hands that reach for it. Each recollection bends it. Each reflection rewrites it. Each emotional state stretches or compresses it. The past is never what it was. It is only what your mind makes of it in the moment you remember it. People often say, the past never changes. But it does. It changes in you. When you revisit a memory, you believe you are viewing something preserved. But what you're really doing is reconstructing it from scattered neural traces, tiny fragments stored across different parts of the brain. To remember is to rebuild, and no rebuild is ever identical to the one before. Each reconstruction is influenced by the present version of you, your mood, your beliefs, your fears, your hopes, your regrets. The past shifts because the present shifts. Memory is not a window. It is a projection. Imagine remembering a moment from a relationship you once thought was perfect. When you first recalled it, you might have felt warmth, nostalgia, tenderness. But years later, after the relationship fractured or ended, the same moment may feel different. The smiles seem forced. The conversations seem shallow. The gestures seem rehearsed. You begin to see signs you never saw before. Patterns that were invisible, meanings that did not exist in the original moment. The past shifts because you shifted. Or consider this, a memory you once considered painful may take on a muted softness years later. What once felt unbearable now feels distant, diluted by time and the growth of your emotional landscape. You no longer tremble when recalling it. Instead, you see lessons, you see meaning, you see survival. The memory has changed, not because the event changed, but because you did. Every version of you remembers the past differently. The child in you remembers events with simplicity and raw emotion. The teenager remembers them with intensity and confusion. The adult remembers them with complexity and interpretation. The elder you will remember them with distance and perspective. And each version of you believes its perspective is the most accurate. But none of them are accurate. They are all reinterpretations. The past shifts each time remembered, because your brain never retrieves the same wiring pattern twice. It reactivates the memory network, modifies it slightly, and stores the updated version again. You don't just remember the original event, you remember the memory of the memory, layered through time. This is why some memories grow sharper, while others fade. Why certain details vanish. Why others grow exaggerated. Why a trivial moment suddenly becomes important years later. Your brain updates the past to match the narrative you currently live inside. If today you see yourself as wounded, the past rearranges to justify that identity. If today you see yourself as strong, the past reshapes to show you victories. If today you see someone as a villain, your memories highlight their flaws. If today you see someone as precious, your memories soften their mistakes. The mind makes the past obey the story it wants to tell. This is also why nostalgia feels distorted. When you reminisce about a simpler time, you're not remembering the actual complexity of those days. You're remembering them from the vantage point of a present moment, filled with burdens, responsibilities, or heartbreak. The past shifts to appear gentler so you can long for it. It becomes a sanctuary, not because it was won, but because you need it to be won. And the opposite is true as well. People who carry unresolved pain often look back and see more wounds than there originally were. They insert meaning, add emotional density, reinterpret neutral moments as harmful. The past darkens to match the shadows inside them. But the most haunting part is this. You never notice when the shift happens. You don't feel the memory mutate. You don't sense the new layer forming. You don't hear the old details dissolving. You don't see the subtle distortions entering. It happens invisibly, quietly, automatically. By the time you recall it again, the new version feels familiar. So familiar that you cannot imagine it ever being different. You trust the altered memory as if it were untouched truth. This is why arguments about what really happened often go nowhere. Each person's past has shifted in its own direction. Each holds a memory updated by years of emotional weather. They are fighting not over the truth, but over competing reconstructions. And both reconstructions feel real. Sometimes you sense the shift, but only faintly. You say things like, "I don't remember it that way anymore. It feels different now. I see that moment completely differently. I don't think it happened like that. I must have remembered it wrong." But it's not that you remembered it wrong. It's that you remembered it again. And remembering again always means remembering differently. There is a strange comfort in this, even if it feels unsettling. The ever-shifting past allows you to grow. If your memories stayed rigid, you would remain trapped in static versions of yourself. You would relive old pain with unbearable intensity. You would cling to old meanings that no longer serve you. The shifting of the past is what allows healing, reinterpretation, forgiveness, or even necessary distance. But there is also a quiet danger here, because if the past keeps changing, you can never truly know it. You can build your identity on memories that have drifted far from reality. You can define yourself by wounds that grew with retelling. You can dwell in nostalgia for moments that never truly happened the way you remember. You can resent someone for actions they didn't commit in the way your memory now paints them. You live inside a narrative that keeps rewriting itself, believing it is unaltered truth. The past is not behind you. It is inside you, and it shifts, reshapes, reforms every time you touch it. Memory is not a record. It is a living organism that grows with you. And every time you remember, you change what you think you've never forgotten. There is a quiet belief you carry without realizing it. The belief that the past sits untouched, stored safely in some mental vault where nothing can alter it. But every time you return to a moment, you do not retrieve it as it was. You retrieve it as you are now. The present version of you edits every past moment you revisit, reshaping it according to who you've become, what you've learned, and what you fear. Your memories are not historical documents. They are living manuscripts constantly revised by the author you are today. You think you remember a moment accurately because the images feel crisp, the emotions feel familiar, and the story feels consistent. But consistency is not truth, it's construction. Your mind prefers coherence over accuracy. It will edit a moment until it makes sense with the person you believe you are. If the original version of you, the one who lived that moment, would disagree, your mind will overwrite their perspective without hesitation. Every memory is a negotiation between past reality and present identity. Take a moment of conflict, for example. When it happened, maybe you were overwhelmed, confused, unsure, but years later, after gaining experience, or bitterness or confidence, you remember the same moment differently. You say, "I should have known," or "I saw it coming," or "I always felt something was off." But you didn't. You only feel that you did, because the present you needs the past to reflect your current clarity. So your mind edits the moment. A look becomes a sign. A hesitation becomes a warning. A coincidence becomes a pattern. A feeling becomes a prophecy. You are not remembering the moment. You are rewriting it to support the story you live in now. This editing happens even with moments of joy. Think about a memory you once held with warmth. If your life has since become darker or heavier, the moment may no longer feel as bright. You may reinterpret the happiness as naive, temporary, or undeserved. You may revise the expressions on people's faces, the tone of their voices, the meaning behind their actions. You dull the past, so it aligns with your current emotional landscape. Your present self dims the lights of old joy. But the opposite is also true. When the present hurts, your mind may edit certain moments to make them appear brighter than they ever were. Nostalgia is an act of editing, not remembering. You strip away the discomfort, smooth out the complications, remove the shadows. You reinvent the moment so you can escape into it. You give the past a halo that never existed. Perhaps the most subtle editing occurs when your beliefs change. If you develop a strong conviction about trust, about love, about betrayal, about purpose, your memories rearrange themselves to match that worldview. Moments that contradict your new beliefs are softened or erased. Moments that support them are sharpened and magnified. Your mind edits the past to justify the present. Think about a person you once admired. If today you feel disappointed in them, your memories will shift to support that disappointment. You'll remember moments that seemed insignificant and reinterpret them as early signs. You'll emphasize their mistakes and minimize their kindness. You'll re-edit their role in your life until the narrative feels stable. Likewise, think about someone you once judged. Over time, as you grow more compassionate, your memories of them soften. You remember their suffering, their humanity, their vulnerability. You reinterpret their actions. You add context that wasn't present in the original moment. Your mind edits the story so you can forgive. Your memories follow the direction of your growth or your wounds. Moments are edited not only emotionally, but logically. Your brain wants to protect you from contradictions, so it rewrites the past to fit the story it believes will keep you stable. If you see yourself as strong now, your past becomes full of quiet victories you once overlooked. If you see yourself as broken, your past becomes a collection of signs pointing to your fragility. The past is rarely the keeper of truth. It is the servant of identity. And the strangest part, you don't notice the edits. You don't feel the shift in detail. You don't sense the distortion. You don't hear the narrative rearranging itself. It happens automatically, beneath awareness, inside the machinery of memory reconstruction. By the time the moment resurfaces in your mind, it feels complete and authentic. You believe the edited version wholeheartedly, never suspecting anything has changed. Your mind makes the edits invisible so you won't fight them. Some edits come from survival. A traumatic moment may be softened or reframed so you can move forward. Some edits come from regret. Your mind rewrites events to ease the burden of guilt. Some come from longing. You reshape moments to feel loved again, or safe again, or understood again. Some edits come from anger. You sharpen the past so the present pain feels justified. Every present emotion reaches backward and alters the memory it touches. What this means, if you follow it to its unsettling end, is that the past you cling to never existed in the form you remember. The more you revisit it, the further it drifts from the original. A memory you recall often becomes more fiction than fact. A memory you rarely touch remains closer to what happened, yet even that one shifts each time it emerges. Your mind does not preserve moments, it repaints them. And the result is a life built on shifting foundations. Stories constantly reshaped by who you are becoming. You may feel certain, but certainty is often just the feeling of a memory that has been edited so many times it can no longer be doubted. But perhaps this is not a flaw, it is an adaptation. If your mind did not edit your past, you would remain trapped by it. Fixed memories would leave no room for healing, growth, reinterpretation, or understanding. The editing process allows you to move, change, evolve. Your past becomes malleable, so your future remains possible. In the end, every moment you revisit carries a fingerprint, not from the time it happened, but from the person you are when you remember it. The past is not something you return to. It is something you recreate. And every memory you hold is a moment edited by present you. You think yesterday is finished? You think it has already chosen its shape. poured itself into the fixed container of time, and hardened there, like cooling metal. But the strange truth is that yesterday is still warm, still soft, still waiting for the pressure of your present self to leave new fingerprints on it. The past does not end. It only waits for reinterpretation, and every time you return to it, every time you allow your mind to touch what you believe is already settled, you unknowingly lift it into a new light, one cast by today's fears, hopes, insights, wounds, and desires. The past is not behind you. It hangs above you like an unlit lantern, and memory is the hand that raises it toward a flame, shifting what the shadows reveal. At first, you don't notice the change. You revisit an old moment, maybe a conversation, a mistake, a triumph, a wound, and it feels familiar, like returning to a room where everything is exactly where you left it. But then something subtle happens. A detail surfaces that never existed before. A tone of voice shifts. Someone's intention seems different. A meaning you had never considered suddenly bleeds into the memory and colors it. And you attribute this to understanding it better now, unaware that you're not uncovering the truth, you're replacing it. The old interpretation dissolves while a new one takes its place, so seamlessly that you don't even realize the exchange occurred. What you call remembering is actually reframing, and reframing is rewriting. This is why a single memory can change depending on your mood. When you're confident, a painful moment from the past appears small and survivable. When you're broken, that same moment enlarges into something monstrous. When you're in love, your past feels forgiving. When you're heartbroken, it feels hostile. The memory has not changed. You have. And because you have, the memory must be rebuilt to match the shape of who you are right now. The past shifts under the gravity of the present. Consider the way grief transforms a memory. Someone you lost becomes kinder in retrospect, gentler, wiser, as if the mind cannot bear to hold imperfections alongside absence. But when anger fills you, that same person becomes colder, sharper, more flawed. You believe you are remembering accurately, but you aren't. You are rewriting the emotional truth of the moment, so it fits what your heart is currently able to carry. The past adapts itself to your capacity, because your mind is more concerned with survival than with accuracy. The light keeps shifting, and with it, the memory keeps changing. This is why two people can walk away from the same event with two incompatible stories, both of them feeling utterly certain they are right. They are not lying. They are not confused. Their internal light source is simply different. Each carries a different set of fears, experiences, expectations, and personal narratives, and those silent forces determine how the past is illuminated. Memory is subjective, not because people fail to remember properly, but because memory is an act of subjective creation in the first place. There is no single unchanging version of what happened. There is only the version your present self allows you to see. And sometimes the new light is not chosen, it is forced. Trauma, for example, throws a harsh beam onto a memory you once viewed gently. You revisit old events, and suddenly everything feels darker, more threatening, more significant. You start connecting fragments that were never connected before. You see warnings you never saw, meanings you never imagined, motives you never questioned. You feel betrayed by your old self. How could you not have seen this earlier? But it wasn't ignorance, it was illumination. You simply didn't have the same internal light then. The mind protects you by limiting what you're able to see, until the moment it no longer can. Then the memory mutates in real time. The past is not fixed, it is reactive. Even happy memories brighten or dim, depending on your present emotional weather. A joyful moment can become painful if it reminds you of what you've lost. A once painful memory can become empowering when viewed through the lens of who you've become. Meaning changes, emotion changes, interpretation changes, and because these change, the memory itself is altered. The phrase "in a new light" sounds poetic, but it is literally what the mind does. Every recollection is a fresh exposure, a new photograph taken with different settings, different angles, different shadows. You believe you are looking at the same picture each time, but you aren't. You're generating a new one based on the last one you revised. This is why memories drift, blur, evolve, sharpen, collapse, or reshape themselves entirely over the years. You are not retrieving a file. You are opening a project, one that autosaves every time you close it. And the most unnerving part is this. You trust these revised memories more than the originals. The newer version feels clearer, cleaner, more complete, because it has been built by your present mind, the version of you that has more information, more experience, more emotional vocabulary. You believe this refined memory must be more accurate because it feels more right. But feeling right is often the final trick. The older version fades, the new version replaces it, and then you forget there was ever a transition at all. Yesterday changes, and you never realize it changed. Your mind does not alter the past to deceive you. It alters the past to sustain you. It shifts meaning to protect your identity. It reinterprets events so they fit into the narrative of the person you are right now. It changes emotional emphasis so that your psyche can bear its own continuity. Accuracy is sacrificed for coherence. Truth is sacrificed for stability. And the past you believe in is the one that helps you function in the present. This is why yesterday never stays yesterday. It continues to evolve under the relentless glow of now. Every time you think backward, the light moves, the shadows rearrange, and the memory reshapes itself to match your current understanding of yourself. You do not remember the past as it was. You remember the past as you are. There is a quiet moment, so small you almost never notice it, right before a memory forms in your mind. It feels like reaching into a drawer you've opened 1,000 times, expecting to find the same contents arranged in the same familiar order. But the moment your hand enters the darkness, something shifts. The drawer is not a storage space. It is a workshop. And what you pull out is not what was placed inside. It is what was rebuilt for you, a split second before you retrieved it. You call this recall. But recall is not an act of retrieval. It is an act of invention. And invention repeated enough times becomes indistinguishable from history. Most people believe memories are stored like photographs, untouched, unchanged, sealed away in perfect stillness. But your brain has no mechanism for preserving a moment exactly as it happened. It does not keep recordings. It keeps impressions, broken, scattered fragments, without context or continuity. When you remember, your mind rushes to fill in the missing pieces, smoothing the edges, brightening what was dull, stitching fragments together with the thread of your narratives and beliefs. You do not pull out a memory, you recreate a moment, and each recreation drifts further from the original, until eventually you've built a past that never existed outside your own imagination. This is how false history begins. Quietly, unintentionally, under the illusion of certainty. It starts with a small reconstruction, adding a detail that was never there, or assuming one that feels like it should have been. You misremember someone's tone of voice, their gesture, the intensity of a moment. Then the next time you recall it, you retrieve the edited version, not the original, and your mind builds on that edited version again. By the 10th or 20th reconstruction, the memory has transformed into something unrecognizable. But to you, it feels more accurate than ever. Emotional confidence increases even as factual precision fades. This is why eyewitnesses contradict each other. Why you swear something happened one way, while another person insists on a completely different version. Why siblings raised in the same home remember opposite childhoods. It is not deception, it is reconstruction. Each person builds a private version of history that aligns with their identity, their emotional state, their worldview. And as those internal structures change, so does their version of the past. Your brain's goal is not to preserve truth. Its goal is to create stability. And stability requires coherence, even at the cost of accuracy. So the mind bends the past to support the story you already tell yourself. If you see yourself as someone who is always hurting, your past becomes darker. If you believe you are resilient, your past becomes full of triumphs and survivals. If your sense of self collapses, your history rearranges itself to explain why. The past is molded not by what occurred, but by the narrative you currently need. This is why a memory can suddenly become clearer years later. Not because you finally remembered it right, but because you finally built a version that matches your present emotional capacity. Recall becomes invention. Emotion becomes evidence. Consistency becomes truth. And the illusion strengthens each time you revisit it. Think about how stories change in your own life. An embarrassing moment becomes funnier each time you retell it, even if it didn't feel funny at the time. A painful moment becomes sharper as you add layers of hurt you didn't notice before. A moment of kindness becomes grander, more symbolic, more meaningful. The emotional tone you apply during the retelling gradually becomes part of the memory itself until you no longer remember what actually happened. You remember the version you've polished. Your brain fills in blanks so efficiently that you don't notice the gaps. When the mind encounters missing information, it doesn't stay empty. It invents, it borrows, it stitches, sometimes from imagination, sometimes from assumptions, sometimes from unrelated experiences, and it presents the final product to you with absolute confidence. You don't feel like you are imagining, you feel like you are remembering. That confidence is the trap. A false memory does not feel false. A rewritten past does not feel rewritten. The mind protects you from uncertainty by giving you a stable narrative, even if that narrative is more fiction than fact. And because it feels right, you accept it. You even defend it. You build your identity around it. And this is where the danger lies. False history isn't always harmless. Sometimes it traps you. You might blame yourself for something you didn't do, or forgive someone who never deserved it, or cling to guilt that belongs to a phantom event your mind exaggerated. You might live your entire life shaped by a version of the past that only exists because your present self needed a particular explanation. And because memory is created, not recovered, you cannot rely on the past to free you. You can only rely on your awareness of how the past is made. But perhaps the strangest part is this. Memory doesn't want to deceive you. It wants to complete you. It wants to make sense of everything that has happened to you in a way that feels meaningful. It wants your story to have continuity, even if that continuity requires imagination. It wants you to survive your own history. This is why, even when memory creates false history, it is doing so for a reason. It is trying to build a version of the past that allows you to move forward, to understand yourself, to ground your emotions. The past becomes a mirror, not a record. And mirrors distort, not to lie, but to reflect in a way that reveals something deeper than the literal truth. In the end, you don't live inside your real past. You live inside the past your mind creates for you. Every recollection is another reconstruction, another rewriting, another small shift in the architecture of yesterday. And piece by piece, invention becomes belief, belief becomes memory, memory becomes history, and history becomes the story you call your life. Memory is a fragile puzzle, and your brain is both the assembler and the artist. Every moment you experience leaves fragments, shapes, colors, sounds, sensations, but rarely a complete picture. Time erodes details, emotions distort the edges, perspective blurs the corners, and yet when you try to recall an event, your mind refuses to present gaps. It cannot tolerate emptiness. It cannot tolerate uncertainty. So it invents. It fills in the missing pieces with whatever fits, whatever feels right, whatever supports the story your present self needs to believe. These invented pieces are not random. They are guided by patterns, assumptions, and expectations. They are drawn from your knowledge, your emotions, your fears, your desires, and your imagination. Sometimes they are borrowed from other memories, subtly altered to appear authentic. Sometimes they are entirely new creations, stitched seamlessly into the existing neural structure so that they feel indisputably real. And each time you recall the memory, the invented pieces solidify, strengthening the illusion that the memory was ever complete to begin with. This is why you can be absolutely certain about events that never actually occurred. Your brain doesn't see gaps. It sees a narrative that demands closure. It cannot leave ambiguity unresolved. A missing smile becomes a remembered gesture. A forgotten word becomes a recollected phrase. A blank space in a conversation becomes an interpretation that feels perfectly logical. Your mind prefers a false certainty over a true void. Consider the way eyewitness testimony often fails. People swear they remember the smallest details, clothing, colors, voices, words, because their brains have filled in the blanks with pieces that make sense, pieces that create a coherent story. The more they recall, the more the invented elements intertwine with reality, and the more their certainty grows. By the end, they believe they have perfect recall, but in truth, they have constructed a hybrid, part memory, part invention. This process begins almost immediately after the event. Even in the first recall, your brain cannot tolerate missing information. The mind instinctively invents, draws from context, and adjusts fragments to create completeness. Over years of repetition, these invented pieces are reinforced until the original gaps are unrecognizable. The memory evolves into a new structure, a mixture of truth, conjecture, imagination, and necessity. Your emotions play a decisive role in this reconstruction. The brain prioritizes meaning over accuracy. If a missing piece threatens your self-image, your values, or your emotional stability, the brain will replace it with something safer, more coherent, or more convenient. If a detail can enhance the narrative you need for comfort, it is amplified. If a detail contradicts the story you tell yourself, it is minimized or erased. Your mind is both guardian and editor, sculpting reality to maintain your psychological equilibrium. The danger lies in the subtlety. These invented pieces are seamless. They are woven into the memory with such precision that they feel indistinguishable from what actually happened. You do not suspect that anything is artificial. You do not question the details, and the more you recall the memory, the more authentic these fabrications feel. Repetition does not correct the inaccuracy, it entrenches it. Every recall reinforces the illusion until it becomes indistinguishable from lived reality. Even the smallest inventions can reshape your understanding of the past. A phrase you misremembered might change the meaning of an entire conversation. A gesture you imagined might redefine the emotional tone of a moment. A fabricated expression can turn a neutral encounter into a deeply emotional one. Memory, then, is not merely about retaining facts. It is about constructing a story that feels coherent, compelling, and survivable. This phenomenon also explains how personal narratives evolve over time. Who you were and who you are now interact through memory, with your present self quietly reshaping your recollections to fit your current identity. You may believe that your story is a faithful account of reality, but in truth, it is a living document, continuously edited, revised, and supplemented with invented elements to preserve a sense of continuity and meaning. Even joyful or trivial memories are subject to this process. A forgotten compliment may be magnified into a cherished moment of intimacy. A minor embarrassment may be softened, exaggerated, or given context that never existed. Every recollection is a collaboration between what happened and what your mind needs it to mean. Your brain is not content to merely store the past. It must complete it, polish it, and give it a narrative arc that aligns with your present self. The unsettling implication is this: much of what you remember is not a record of events, but a mosaic of perception, imagination, and necessity. Your memories are living stories in which reality and invention are inseparable. You live in a world constructed from fragments, a past continuously rebuilt, a personal history that is only partially factual and mostly interpretive. And yet, despite the constant invention, you trust your memories. You rely on them to shape your identity, guide your decisions, and interpret the world. You do not question them, because the invented pieces are not distinguishable. They feel as real as any unaltered fragment. Your brain has completed its masterpiece so flawlessly that doubt seems impossible. Your past is full of gaps. Your present mind fills them in, and over time, you may forget that any of it was ever missing. Memory is a patient storyteller. It does not rush. It does not demand attention. It does not reveal its alterations all at once. Instead, it works gradually, silently, weaving small distortions into your recollections over time. A single change here, a subtle reinterpretation there, and eventually, the memory you hold so dearly drifts away from what actually occurred. Slowly, imperceptibly, Every memory becomes fiction, blended with invention, reshaped by emotion, polished by your present self until it feels like reality. You don't notice it happening. By the time you do, the truth is buried under layers of reconstruction so seamless that even your own certainty cannot distinguish fact from fabrication. Think of a memory from childhood. The images, the sounds, the feelings, they all seem vivid at first. You remember the laughter, the warmth, the interactions, but every time you recall that scene, your mind unconsciously edits it. Perhaps a smile is slightly exaggerated. Perhaps a voice sounds clearer than it did. Perhaps a gesture is filled with intention it never carried. The memory itself is not lying, it is evolving, and with each recall, your brain saves the updated version, replacing the original with a subtly altered narrative that fits your present self. The process is cumulative. Each retelling is an opportunity for distortion. Emotional states add layers of nuance or bias. Knowledge gained after the event reshapes your interpretation. Desire, fear, regret, pride, love, all become brushes that paint over the old details, leaving only the image that serves the current version of you. No one event escapes this quiet transformation. Every memory carries this slow metamorphosis, whether it is joyful, painful, trivial, or monumental. Over time, distinctions blur. The line between what happened and what you imagined fades. Facts merge with assumptions. Sensations merge with expectations. Intentions merge with interpretation. Your recollections become narratives constructed more from the mind in the present than from events in the past. And yet each iteration feels more authentic than the last because it resonates with your sense of who you are now. This is why people can remember the same event differently over decades. Your memory is not a record stored in a vault. It is a living document, rewritten silently with each retrieval. By the time years pass, the story you hold may bear little resemblance to the actual events, but it feels undeniably true. Fiction and fact entwine until they are indistinguishable, and certainty masks the gradual erosion of reality. Memory's fictionality is not a flaw. It is an adaptation. Without this gradual transformation, you would carry every raw experience, unchanged, raw emotions trapped in perfect fidelity. Trauma would remain unbearable. Joy might feel fragile. Confusion could paralyze. The slow fiction allows you to live with continuity, to integrate experiences, to survive psychologically. The mind edits, reshapes, and softens, turning chaotic events into coherent narratives. Fiction becomes comfort, distortion becomes meaning, and survival depends on belief. Yet, there is an unsettling paradox. The very memories that shape your identity, the ones that guide your decisions, define your values, and anchor your sense of self, are built on shifting ground. They are fiction, layered upon fragments of reality. You rely on them to make sense of your past and to navigate your future. But the longer the story persists in your mind, the more fictional it becomes. Each retelling strengthens the narrative, reinforces the belief, and further distances it from what truly happened. Even significant events, moments that feel monumental, are subject to this slow fiction. The details that once seemed sharp fade into general impressions. The feelings that once seemed raw are smoothed or reinterpreted. Moments of betrayal or intimacy are colored by subsequent experiences, creating new textures, new meanings. By the time memory has repeatedly reconstructed these scenes, the original reality may exist only as a shadow behind layers of interpretation. What remains is the story your mind has needed to tell to sustain you. Every human experience, every conversation, every triumph, every wound, every fleeting joy undergoes this transformation. Memory is not a container, it is a process. With each act of recall, it reweaves the threads, fills in gaps, and smooths contradictions. Over time, reality bends to narrative. The more frequently a memory is accessed, the more fiction solidifies within it, until certainty itself becomes the most compelling evidence of accuracy. And yet this slow fiction is inseparable from identity. Who you are depends on the stories you tell yourself about the past. Even if those stories are partly or largely fictionalized, they provide coherence, continuity, and meaning. Without this constant process of reshaping, your sense of self would fracture. Your understanding of your life would remain chaotic, and your capacity to grow would be limited. The fiction of memory is what allows life to be navigable, survivable, and narratively coherent. But the quiet danger is in the illusion of stability. You believe you remember. You believe the details are accurate. You believe the story is faithful to reality. Yet with each recall, the memory shifts imperceptibly, rewriting itself without notice. Fiction becomes fact in perception, and the distinction between what was and what is imagined becomes irrelevant. The mind produces a past that fits the present, a narrative that sustains identity, a story that never truly existed in the form you think you know. Every memory, over time, becomes fiction. Not suddenly, not dramatically, slowly, silently, patiently, and the fiction feels so real that it becomes the foundation of your life. Memory does not exist in isolation. It is entwined with the pulses of your present emotional state, shaped and shaded by the feelings that accompany you in the moment of recall. A memory is never simply a record of what happened. It is a reflection, refracted through the lens of who you are right now, and what you feel at this very moment. Past events do not stay fixed. They bend, stretch, and twist, echoing the emotional weather inside you. Joy brightens them, sorrow darkens them, anger sharpens them, and fear warps them. The past is elastic. The past is responsive. The past exists, in part, only because you feel it. Consider a memory of someone you loved. When you recall it while happy, the moments shimmer with warmth. Every word seems kind, every gesture tender, every glance affectionate. The memory itself almost glows, carrying a brilliance that perhaps it did not originally possess. But when the same memory surfaces in sadness or regret, it may twist. Soft smiles feel hollow, gestures seem distant or forced, conversations feel heavier, and every nuance carries a trace of disappointment. The events themselves have not changed, yet their meaning, their emotional weight, bends entirely to match your current state. This bending is not conscious. It happens automatically, beneath the surface of awareness. Your brain seeks coherence between your inner life and the events of the past. Emotions act like a sculptor, molding the contours of your recollections until they reflect your current self. Happiness transforms triviality into joy. Anxiety magnifies danger. Anger sharpens slight insults into profound betrayals. The past becomes a mirror of the emotional truth you inhabit today, not a photograph of what occurred then. Even mundane memories undergo this transformation. A simple conversation may feel light and playful when you are content, tense and critical when you are anxious, and distant or meaningless when you are detached. The brain prioritizes emotional congruence over factual accuracy. It does not retain reality. It retains coherence with feeling. Past events bend to emotion because the mind values stability over truth. It is easier to feel that the past matches your present than to reconcile it with contradictory evidence. This emotional shaping extends to identity itself. When you feel proud, your memories emphasize moments of achievement, resilience, and skill. When you feel ashamed, the same memories highlight mistakes, awkwardness, or weakness. When you are afraid, recollections emphasize danger, judgment, or vulnerability. Over time, your sense of self becomes inseparable from these emotionally bent memories. You are in part defined by how your feelings have sculpted your past. The bending is cumulative. Each recall reshapes the memory further. Each retelling adds another layer of emotional influence. By the time you remember an event for the 20th or 50th time, it may no longer resemble what happened in any objective sense. Yet the emotional truth, the feeling the memory evokes, is heightened, sharpened, and more convincing than the original experience. In this way, emotion writes history as much as fact does, if not more so. This is why two people recalling the same event often experience irreconcilable versions. Each person carries a unique emotional signature, and their pasts are filtered through these signatures. Where one person felt fear, another felt excitement. Where one experienced neglect, another experienced indifference. Their memories diverge not through dishonesty, but through the inherent malleability of events under emotional influence. Memory is not passive, it is an act of creation, and emotion is its most powerful instrument. Even memories we consider factual or objective are not immune. A detail that seemed inconsequential can gain weight in retrospect. Because your feelings demand it. A slight glance becomes contempt. A moment of silence becomes judgment. A forgotten phrase becomes a condemnation. Emotion expands and contracts, highlights and obscures, bends the past until it mirrors your internal landscape. What you feel now becomes what you remember then. The subtle danger is that the more you revisit an emotionally colored memory, the more entrenched it becomes. The brain does not separate invented emotion from actual experience. Each time you relive the past with present feeling, you reinforce the altered memory, embedding it more deeply. Over years, a single event may become something you never truly experienced, but the emotional imprint is real, tangible, undeniable. Your mind believes it, you believe it, your identity is built upon it. Yet this bending is also what allows survival, growth, and healing. Memories reshaped by positive emotion can buffer trauma. Memories reshaped by reflective sadness can create wisdom. Memories reshaped by love or gratitude can foster resilience. The elasticity of the past, influenced by feeling, allows the mind to navigate the impossible complexity of life without becoming paralyzed by truth, regret, or incompleteness. The paradox is that the more your memories bend to emotion, the less you can trust them as factual, yet the more they define the person you have become. Reality becomes secondary, meaning becomes primary, and meaning is inseparable from the feelings that have molded it. Past events bend to emotion. They are never neutral. They are never frozen. They are living, breathing reflections of your inner state, shifting each time you encounter them. What you feel now colors what you remember then. And in this dance, your history is rewritten, not with facts, but with feeling. Memory is less a record than a reflection, less a chronicle than a canvas, and the past is always being painted by the hand of the present heart. Memory is not static. It is a river, constantly flowing, reshaping its banks, carrying fragments that settle differently each time you recall an event, each time you speak about it, each time you think it over. The memory itself subtly changes. You might assume that repetition reinforces accuracy, that telling a story repeatedly preserves the truth, but the opposite is closer to reality. Every retelling reshapes, reconstructs, and often distorts the memory. Memories shift with each retelling, like clay molded repeatedly by hands both familiar and unseen, until the original form is barely recognizable. The shift begins the moment you articulate the memory, even silently in your mind. The act of putting it into words imposes a structure that never existed before. You select what seems important, ignore what seems trivial, emphasize certain sensations, diminish others. Each choice rewrites the memory. The way you frame it, what you include and exclude, is influenced by who you are now, how you feel, and what you believe. In retelling, you are no longer a passive witness. You are an active author, reshaping the story to fit the narrative of your present self. Consider a personal story you have told to a friend multiple times. The first retelling may be rough, incomplete, awkward. The second time, you add details to make sense of the experience. The third time, you smooth over contradictions. By the 10th time, the memory is polished, more coherent, more emotionally resonant. You may even add moments that never occurred, interpret gestures in new ways, or adjust sequences to strengthen meaning. Each retelling is a revision, a subtle reconstruction, a small betrayal of the original truth, and yet it feels accurate because it aligns with the memory as you now experience it. This process is influenced by your audience, your emotional state, and your desires. When recounting a memory to someone you respect, you may unconsciously enhance your role or diminish mistakes. When revisiting it alone, your mind may exaggerate certain details for clarity or significance. Emotional intensity at the moment of retelling, anger, nostalgia, pride, shame, colors the memory, embedding interpretations that may not have existed before. Every recall subtly shifts the past to fit the lens through which you now view it. Even private retellings, the moments when you simply think back on the past, alter the memory. The brain does not distinguish between telling a story aloud and rehearsing it internally. Every act of recollection is an act of reconstruction. Each time you replay a memory in your mind, the network of neurons encoding it is reactivated, slightly modified and stored again. The memory is never retrieved exactly as it was. It is rebuilt, and the rebuilt version is the one stored for future recall. Over time, this leads to what some psychologists call memory drift. Details change, emotions intensify or soften, meanings shift. What was once peripheral may become central, and vice versa. A trivial comment becomes significant. A small failure becomes a lesson. An innocuous smile becomes an affirmation of love. The memory slowly evolves into a narrative that fits your present understanding of the world. By the time you notice, the memory feels more vivid, more true, and more significant than it ever was, yet it may no longer reflect reality. This is why testimonies in court, recollections of childhood, and stories passed down through generations vary dramatically. It is not deliberate deception. It is the natural evolution of memory under repeated recall. Each retelling strengthens some elements, diminishes others, and layers interpretation over the raw experience. Over decades, a single moment may exist in as many variations as there have been recalls, each reshaped by context, emotion, and perspective. The past becomes a living narrative, constantly edited, rarely consistent. The phenomenon also explains why reflection can feel transformative. Revisiting a memory allows your current self to insert insight, reframe events, or find patterns that were previously invisible. You do not merely remember, you reinterpret. But reinterpretation is reconstruction, and reconstruction shifts the memory itself. The more you analyze or discuss a memory, the further it drifts from the moment as it occurred, until your memory becomes a story crafted as much by reflection as by experience. Even when the memory seems painful or traumatic, repeated recall reshapes it. Emotional intensity may increase, fade, or shift focus. Traumatic moments can be softened or exaggerated. Details you once overlooked may loom larger. The narrative changes to accommodate survival, understanding, or emotional coherence. Memories are malleable, and repeated retelling allows them to evolve in ways that serve the mind's need to interpret and integrate experiences. The quiet truth is this: memories are never fixed. Every thought, every word, every reflection reshapes them. Repetition does not guarantee fidelity. It ensures evolution. The more you revisit an event, the more it adapts to your present self, until what you remember is not the original moment, but a reconstruction that feels real, familiar, and authoritative. Memories shift, not because you fail to remember, but because remembering itself is an act of creation. Memory is not a static archive. It is a river that flows through time, and every retelling moves the water, changing the current, reshaping the banks, and altering the reflection of the sky. Memory is a curious paradox. The more we revisit it, the more certain we become of its accuracy, even as it drifts further from the truth. Each retelling, each act of reflection, solidifies the narrative in our minds, embedding details, emotions, and interpretations as if they were immutable facts. The story grows firmer, more coherent, more convincing, and yet beneath this growing certainty lies a subtle transformation. What you believe to be an exact record of events is often a carefully reconstructed narrative, gradually built upon fragments, interpretations, and invented pieces. Over time, your mind blurs the line between what actually happened and what it has created. This process begins innocuously. A small memory is recalled, perhaps a moment of triumph, a conversation, or an incident from childhood. At first you notice gaps, inconsistencies, or missing details. Your brain instinctively fills them in, smoothing over rough edges, enhancing significance, and supplying plausible connections. Each retrieval reinforces these changes, and your memory becomes increasingly polished, coherent, and believable. With repetition, the reconstruction consolidates, confidence grows. You begin to trust your recollection without question, even though the memory has diverged from its original state. The certainty is seductive. It provides stability, continuity, and a sense of control over your past. Your identity depends on this certainty. If your memories were unstable, fragmented, or contradictory, your sense of self would feel equally fragile. By growing more certain, stories create a stable framework upon which you build your life. The mind rewards coherence over accuracy because survival and functionality require a cohesive narrative. Yet the very certainty that supports your selfhood is often based on a memory that is, at least in part, fabricated. Emotion intensifies this effect. Memories imbued with strong feelings, love, fear, pride, regret, tend to solidify faster. Emotional reinforcement acts like a seal, locking the memory into place. Each retelling recalls not only the events themselves, but also the feelings associated with them. Over time, the emotional resonance becomes inseparable from the content of the memory. You are no longer merely recalling an event, you are reliving it with the intensity of feeling it generated. And with each repetition, your conviction in its truth grows stronger, even as subtle distortions accumulate. Social factors also play a role. When you share a story with others, their responses, reactions, or interpretations can reinforce certain elements. A nod, a question, a shared laugh can validate a particular detail, embedding it more deeply into memory. The retelling becomes a collaborative construction, with external affirmation strengthening the perceived accuracy. Over time, the story evolves not only according to your own reconstruction, but also in dialogue with others, solidifying details and interpretations that may never have existed in reality. This phenomenon explains why people can be utterly certain about events that never occurred, or about details that never happened. The more a story is rehearsed, retold, and reflected upon, the more authoritative it feels. Certainty is the mind's way of asserting coherence, even when the foundations are partially imagined. What feels most vivid and confident is not necessarily the most accurate. Often it is simply the version that has been reconstructed and reinforced the most. The consequences extend beyond individual perception. Shared memories, passed down within families, communities, or cultures, can become fixed narratives, shaping identity and collective history. Yet these stories are not static records. They are cumulative reconstructions, growing more certain with each retelling. Even as minor details shift or are invented, the overall narrative becomes unquestionable, forming a shared past that may diverge from actual events. Memory, certainty, and story merge, producing a collective history that is as much constructed as it is remembered. Certainty also influences future recollection. Once a memory feels established, your brain treats it as factual, even in the face of conflicting evidence. New experiences, new information, or alternative interpretations are often incorporated selectively, filtered through the lens of the already certain story. The narrative becomes self-reinforcing, resistant to challenge, and increasingly detached from its origin. Over time, the story you trust is not simply a reflection of the past. It is a carefully edited artifact shaped by repeated recall, emotional resonance, and social validation. And yet this growing certainty is both necessary and inevitable. Without it, memory would remain unstable, fragmented, and unreliable. Identity, understanding, and continuity would be compromised. Stories must grow certain in order for life to be navigable. The mind sacrifices literal accuracy to achieve coherence, meaning, and stability. Fiction and fact intertwine seamlessly, and you accept the reconstruction as reality because it serves your sense of self and your understanding of the world. In this way, memory is both fragile and resilient. It is fragile because it can be altered, reconstructed, and reshaped. It is resilient because it grows stronger and more convincing with every act of retelling. Certainty is the scaffolding upon which the mind builds identity, interprets experience, and maintains psychological continuity. And the quiet, almost invisible work of reconstruction ensures that even as reality blurs, your life retains coherence and meaning. Memories shift, gaps are filled, and emotions bend the past. Stories are retold, polished, and reinforced. And slowly, inexorably, they grow more certain, until what you believe happened is as vivid, real, and undeniable as life itself. Every memory you hold is incomplete. Time erodes the edges, attention neglects the details, and perception captures only fragments. What you recall is never the full scene. It is always partial, fractured, and fragmented. Yet when you remember, you do not perceive gaps. Your mind refuses emptiness. It cannot tolerate missing information, so it fills the voids. It supplies what is absent. It constructs continuity out of fragments, and in doing so, it reshapes the memory itself. What you experience as a complete recollection is always a collaboration between what actually happened and what your mind has invented to make sense of it. These mental insertions are subtle. You rarely notice them because they are guided by context, expectation, and emotion. A missing gesture becomes the one that fits the narrative. A forgotten word is supplied from your imagination, seamlessly integrated into the conversation. A blank space in time is bridged with assumptions or logical inferences. Your mind is a consummate storyteller, producing coherence even when reality is incomplete. The result is a memory that feels whole, familiar, and utterly believable, even when it contains elements that never existed. The process begins almost instantly. Even immediately after an event, your brain encounters incomplete information. Sensory input is partial, perception selective, attention fragmented. The memory that forms from this partial data is a reconstruction, an interpretation, a framework awaiting completion. The gaps do not remain. They are automatically filled with the most probable, plausible, or emotionally satisfying elements. The moment you later recall this memory, the constructed gaps are indistinguishable from the original fragments. You experience the memory as if it were complete, unaware of how much has been supplemented. This phenomenon explains many everyday experiences. You might recall a conversation with perfect fluency, only to later discover that some words or phrases were not actually said. You might remember a gesture, a tone, or a facial expression that never occurred. You might feel certain about details that are entirely imagined. The mind fills in gaps to maintain a coherent story, because coherence is psychologically more valuable than factual accuracy. It is the glue that holds your sense of reality together. Emotion guides the construction. A moment you feel strongly about, pride, fear, regret, joy, is more susceptible to gap filling because your mind seeks to amplify the emotional resonance. Missing details are replaced with those that heighten significance or support your narrative. If you want to believe that someone cared for you, the memory will supply warmth, attention, or kindness, even if it was subtle or absent. If you feel guilt, the memory may magnify errors or omissions, filling in actions or thoughts you never actually had. Emotion acts as a lens through which the mind selects and constructs missing pieces. The gaps can also be filled with fragments borrowed from other memories. Your mind recycles details, merging them with current recollections to create a continuous story. A smile from a different occasion may be added to a memory of someone you love. A phrase overheard years later may become part of a remembered conversation. A sound experienced elsewhere may be woven into an old scene. Over time, this patchwork produces a memory that is internally consistent, vivid, and compelling, yet composed partly or entirely of elements that never originally existed. This gap-filling mechanism is adaptive. It allows you to interpret incomplete information, navigate uncertainty, and maintain a coherent narrative of your life. Without it, every memory would remain fragmented, chaotic, and confusing. The mind cannot tolerate such disarray. To preserve identity, emotional continuity, and the ability to function, it fills in the blanks, even if this means inventing reality. The memory becomes not only a record, but a construction that serves survival. Yet there is a subtle danger in this process. The more frequently a memory is recalled, and the more gaps are filled, the more it diverges from actual events. Each recall reinforces the constructed elements, solidifying them into something that feels entirely authentic. The reconstructed memory becomes the version you believe absolutely, even as the original fragments recede into shadow. Over time, the distinction between fact and invention fades, leaving only a memory that feels whole, consistent, and true, though much of it may be imagined. Even when recalling traumatic or critical events, your mind fills in gaps selectively. The brain may soften threatening details, emphasize supportive cues, or invent elements that explain or justify outcomes. The mind is rarely concerned with objective accuracy. It is concerned with coherence, meaning, and continuity. This is why two people can remember the same incident in starkly different ways, each filling in gaps according to their perspective, emotional state, and personal narrative. The ultimate implication is profound. Your memories are always constructions. Every recollection is a combination of what happened and what your mind has supplied. Every memory contains blanks, and every blank is inevitably filled. What you hold as your past is not merely a record of events, it is a living story, continuously completed by your present self. The mind does not let gaps remain. It fills them in silently, invisibly, inexorably, until the memory is no longer partial but complete, coherent, and utterly believable. Your mind fills in gaps so well that you never know they exist. Your memory feels whole, but it is always partially invented. Memory is not a simple replay of events. It is a reconstruction, an act of building, repairing, and sometimes embellishing. And paradoxically, the more a memory is rebuilt, the more real it feels. Each act of recollection is a subtle redesign, a layering of fragments, gaps, emotions, and interpretations. Over time, these rebuilt yesterdays take on a vividness, coherence, and presence that can surpass the clarity of the original moment itself. What you remember does not simply return, it is recreated, refined, and often intensified. Rebuilt yesterdays feel more real than the fleeting instants that originally gave rise to them. This phenomenon begins with the mind's need for continuity. Life is experienced in moments, yet understanding requires a narrative that stretches across time. Memory stitches fragments into a story, smoothing contradictions, linking events, and assigning meaning. Each reconstruction reinforces patterns, reshapes details, and emphasizes emotional resonance. With each recall, the past becomes less a sequence of discrete experiences and more a coherent, tangible world. A world you inhabit mentally, where events feel as palpable as the present. The process is subtle. You may not notice the enhancements, the way a smile appears brighter, a gesture more deliberate, a feeling more profound. Small gaps are filled with plausible or emotionally satisfying details. Inaccuracies are rationalized, contradictions reconciled. Each layer adds texture, color, and depth. In essence, you are editing your own past to ensure that it aligns with the story your present self needs to believe. Over time, the memory transforms from a fragile impression into a robust, living scene. Emotion amplifies the realism of rebuilt memories. Moments imbued with love, fear, pride, or grief gain intensity as they are recalled. The mind does not merely reconstruct, it heightens. Subtle sensations may be exaggerated, small interactions magnified, fleeting emotions transformed into enduring impressions. The rebuilt memory does not just resemble the past, it feels alive. You may remember not just what happened, but how it felt, often more vividly than when it first occurred. Your internal perception convinces you that the memory is authentic, complete, and undeniably real. Language and thought contribute as well. When you describe a memory, even internally, you impose structure, sequence, and emphasis. Words clarify, emphasize, and sometimes alter the memory. Conceptualizing a past moment forces coherence, linking fragments that were once disjointed. Reconstructed memories often gain a narrative arc, emotional rhythm, and a sense of purpose or meaning that may have been absent in the original experience. The mind transforms fleeting impressions into stories that feel tangible, convincing, and detailed. Social interaction further solidifies these reconstructions. Sharing memories with others, discussing them, or hearing someone else recount a related story reinforces certain details and interpretations. External validation lends weight to the memory, embedding it more deeply. Your rebuilt yesterdays are not only shaped internally, but also subtly shaped by the feedback and reactions of others. They grow richer, more detailed, and more convincing with each retelling, until the distinction between original and reconstructed experience is almost impossible to perceive. Even the smallest details contribute to the sense of reality. A particular word, gesture, sound, or color can anchor a memory, giving it depth and specificity. When these details are emphasized, refined, or invented during reconstruction, the memory gains tangibility. The more specific, coherent, and emotionally resonant the scene becomes, the more real it feels. In this way, your mind transforms fragments into fully inhabited spaces, fleeting moments into enduring mental realities. The paradox is striking. The more a memory is rebuilt, edited, and revised, the more convincing it becomes. The mind compensates for uncertainty and incompleteness by enhancing and consolidating details, creating an internal past that is richer than the original. Your mental reconstruction becomes your lived reality, shaping your identity, guiding decisions, and influencing perception. You trust these rebuilt yesterdays, rely on them, and feel certain of them, even if they are composites of fact, invention, and interpretation. This process also explains why nostalgia feels so intense. Rebuilt memories are not fragile echoes. They are vivid, detailed, and emotionally saturated. You feel the moment more than you ever did at the time. The reconstructed past exerts a gravitational pull, shaping your emotions, expectations, and sense of self. It is not simply recollection. It is immersion in a version of the past that your mind has made tangible, coherent, and emotionally compelling. Ultimately, rebuilt yesterdays are proof of memory's power to create reality within the mind. They are not static records, but living constructions, continuously reshaped, refined, and reinforced. And the more we revisit, interpret, and share them, the more real they feel. The act of remembering is not passive. It is an act of creation, making the past come alive in a form that often surpasses its original clarity. Rebuilt yesterdays do not merely exist in memory. They feel alive. They feel concrete. And they often feel more real than the fleeting moments they were meant to capture. Memory is a living process, not a static archive. Each time you recall an event, the original imprint of that experience is subtly altered. What you remember is not the pristine moment as it happened, but a reconstruction shaped by your present self, emotional state, and accumulated interpretations. In fact, every act of recall overwrites, even if imperceptibly, the memory's original form. The moment you retrieve a memory, the neurons encoding it are reactivated, reshaped, and stored again. The act of remembering is, paradoxically, also an act of forgetting. Recall erases the original imprint, replacing it with a slightly modified, slightly polished version that aligns with your current understanding and narrative. This process begins immediately upon remembering. As your brain reconstructs the scene, it emphasizes some details, downplays others, and fills in gaps. The new version is stored, often supplanting the older, more fragmentary imprint. With repetition, this effect compounds. The original sensory impressions, emotional tones, and minor details gradually fade beneath the accumulated reconstructions. What once existed as a distinct ephemeral experience becomes an ever-evolving narrative, shaped more by ongoing reinterpretation than by actual events. The memory you believe is authentic is rarely identical to the original encounter. This mechanism is not an error, it is adaptive. Your mind prioritizes coherence, meaning, and psychological stability over fidelity to raw experience. Exact recall would trap you in contradictions, inconsistencies, and fragments too incomplete to make sense of. By altering memories each time they are recalled, your brain ensures continuity, integrates new understanding, and preserves emotional balance. Recall functions as a subtle editor, overriding imperfections and ambiguities with a version of the past that fits the present. In this sense, forgetting and remembering are inseparable. Every recollection modifies what came before. Emotion plays a decisive role in this transformation. Events laden with strong feelings, joy, fear, regret, love, are particularly susceptible. The emotional state present at the time of recall can amplify, diminish, or reinterpret elements of the memory. Anger can exaggerate conflict, longing can romanticize encounters, shame can magnify perceived faults. The original imprint is rarely preserved intact because it must coexist with the emotional truth of the moment of recall. Over time, the reconstructed memory often feels more vivid, coherent, and emotionally resonant than the initial experience, yet it diverges further from the factual record. Language and thought reinforce this effect. When you describe a memory, whether internally or aloud, you impose structure and sequence, select emphasis, and clarify meaning. Every narrative act transforms the memory, embedding the edited version in place of the original. Even subtle interpretations or assumptions introduced during reflection become integrated into the memory's new imprint. This is why details can shift, Sequences may change, and minor elements may be added or omitted. The act of remembering is not neutral, it is transformative. Social interactions accelerate the erasure of the original imprint. Sharing memories with others introduces external perspectives, validation or reinterpretations. The responses you receive, whether verbal, nonverbal, or emotional, influence how you encode the memory anew. You may emphasize certain aspects to align with your audience, omit others to simplify or protect yourself, or adjust details to match collective understanding. Each retelling overwrites the prior imprint, reinforcing a version that feels coherent and credible. Over time, the original event becomes a shadow beneath layers of reconstruction, shaped by countless acts of recall. The subtlety of this process is striking. You rarely notice the erasure. Each modified version feels authentic, vivid, and authoritative. You do not recognize the gradual displacement of the original imprint because memory is self-consistent and internally coherent. What you trust as your authentic recollection is often the cumulative result of multiple reconstructions, with the original traces diminished or lost. The mind is both guardian and sculptor, preserving the essence of the experience while altering its details to maintain continuity, coherence, and meaning. This phenomenon explains the malleability of eyewitness testimony, the evolution of personal narratives, and the transformation of shared history. Events remembered differently by different people may reflect not deliberate deception, but the natural erosion of original imprints through repeated recall. Even within a single individual, the memory of the same event may shift over time, retaining emotional resonance while diverging in factual detail. Recall itself is rewriting history, one act at a time. Yet the erasure of the original imprint is not entirely destructive. It allows integration of new understanding, emotional growth, and adaptation. Memories become functional tools for navigating life rather than rigid records. What is lost in fidelity is gained in coherence and relevance. The past, reconstructed with each recall, continues to guide, inform, and shape identity. The memory that persists is not a static relic. It is a living, evolving artifact of consciousness. Recall erases the original imprint silently, invisibly, inexorably. What you remember is not what happened, but what your mind has rebuilt. And the memory you trust as authentic is the version your present self has created, not the one that first existed. Memory is never isolated from the present. Every recollection occurs in the context of who you are now, what you feel now, and how you perceive the world at this moment. As you retrieve old moments, they do not remain frozen in time. Instead, they merge with your current self, fusing past and present into a seamless experience. The boundary between what happened then and what exists now becomes blurred. Old moments are not simply remembered, they are experienced anew, reshaped by the consciousness that recalls them. Memory is not a passive archive, it is a dynamic process that entwines past with present, creating a continuum in which time is malleable. This merging begins subtly. When you think of an event from years ago, the mind overlays current knowledge, emotions, and perspectives onto the memory. You reinterpret actions, intentions, and outcomes through the lens of present understanding. A conflict that once felt unjust may now seem inevitable. A gesture once ignored may now feel significant. The memory is no longer the raw occurrence. It is filtered, reframed, and fused with the insights, beliefs, and emotional states of your present self. You are not simply remembering, you are reliving the event through a consciousness that did not exist at the time. Emotion deepens this fusion. Feelings from the present moment color the recollection, shaping perception and significance. Nostalgia adds warmth, longing adds intensity, regret adds shadow, pride adds brightness. The original emotional texture of the memory is often replaced, or at least heavily modified, by the emotions of the current self. Over time, old moments begin to feel as though they were always aligned with your present emotional landscape. Past experiences are no longer independent of you, they are extensions of who you are now. Even trivial details are affected. Facial expressions, dialogue, and environmental cues can be subtly altered to match current interpretation. You might recall a room brighter, a conversation more meaningful, or a gesture more intentional than it actually was. These changes are seamless, integrated so naturally that the memory feels authentic. In the process, the past does not merely coexist with the present, it becomes inseparable from it. What you believe happened is filtered, edited, and enhanced by your current consciousness, merging old and new into a single continuous reality. This merging is adaptive. By integrating past moments with present understanding, the mind creates coherence and continuity. Memories serve not only as records of past events, but as tools for navigating the present. By updating and merging them, the brain allows lessons, insights, and emotional processing to flow seamlessly across time. You do not merely recall a moment, you reinterpret it, learn from it, and allow it to influence decisions and behaviors in the present. Memory becomes functional, alive, and relevant, not simply archival. Language and thought further facilitate this fusion. Internal narratives impose structure, causal links, and meaning onto old moments. Each act of reflection reframes the memory, aligning it with the worldview and beliefs of the present self. When you talk about the past or think about it internally, you subtly alter its form to fit your current perspective. These changes embed themselves in memory, solidifying the integration of past and present. Recollections become stories in which yesterday and today coexist, intertwined, inseparable, and mutually defining. Social context reinforces the merging. Conversations with others can confirm, contradict, or reinterpret memories, further blending past events with current experience. The act of sharing does not merely transmit a fixed memory, it reshapes it according to present context and audience. Over time, your recollections become composites, co-created between your internal consciousness and the social environment, further entangling the old with the new. Your past becomes a living narrative, continuously interacting with the ever-shifting present. Yet this fusion also creates uncertainty. As old moments merge with now, distinguishing what truly occurred from what is reconstructed becomes increasingly difficult. The past is no longer a separate domain. It is inseparable from the present. You trust your memories, yet they are filtered, reshaped, and enhanced by current perception. What you hold as your history is not purely a record of events. It is an ongoing dialogue between your past experiences and present consciousness. The paradox is striking. The mind creates continuity by merging what was with what is, producing memories that feel vivid, coherent, and authentic. These merged moments guide your understanding, influence decisions, and shape identity. Yet in doing so, they blur the boundary between objective history and subjective reconstruction. The past and present coexist within consciousness, inseparable, interwoven, and continuously evolving. Old moments merged with now are not merely remembered, they are experienced, relived, and transformed. Time becomes elastic, memory becomes dynamic, and the past is inseparable from the consciousness that recalls it. Memory is not a photograph. It does not capture life as a static image, frozen in time and space. Instead, memory is more like a painting, vivid, interpretive, and continuously redrawn by the mind. Each act of recall is a brushstroke, each reflection a new layer of paint, and over time the scene you remember is transformed. Your brain redraws old scenes, filling in missing details, emphasizing what matters, and minimizing what seems trivial. The result is a memory that feels complete, coherent, and vivid, even though it may bear little resemblance to the original moment. What you see in your mind is less a record than a reconstruction, a creative act of cognition. The process begins the moment you attempt to recall a scene. Sensory impressions, colors, sounds, textures are partially retained, partially reconstructed. If certain details are forgotten, the brain supplies what seems probable or meaningful. A tree might appear fuller, a voice clearer, a gesture more intentional. Each reconstruction is guided by perception, emotion, and present knowledge, subtly altering the scene with every recall. Your brain does not aim for fidelity to the original. It aims for coherence, clarity, and significance, producing a memory that feels real and continuous, rather than fragmented or ambiguous. Emotion exerts a profound influence on this redrawing. Feelings at the time of recollection shape not only what is emphasized, but how it is visually and sensorially represented. Happiness might make a scene warmer, with brighter colors and softer light. Fear might cast shadows, heighten contrasts, and distort spatial perception. Nostalgia can imbue every detail with a glow that never existed. The reconstructed scene is filtered through current emotions, blending past and present into a memory that aligns with how you feel now. In this sense, the past is not fixed, it is malleable, painted anew each time it is remembered. Cognitive biases also play a role. The mind selects what to highlight and what to suppress, reinforcing narratives consistent with your identity, beliefs, or desired interpretation. In recalling a conversation, your brain may emphasize words or gestures that support the story you tell about yourself, while diminishing or altering contradictory details. Over time, these adjustments solidify, producing a scene that feels authentic, yet increasingly departs from factual reality. The brain's redrawing is both creative and adaptive, constructing memories that serve coherence, self-understanding, and emotional stability. Language and thought reinforce the effect. Internal narration structures the memory, adding sequences, causal links, and emphasis. Even thinking about a scene in your mind imposes order and interpretation, reshaping the visual and sensory elements. A glance that was brief may seem meaningful. A sound that was faint may become clear. A space that was empty may appear populated. Each recall layers new meaning, and each layer integrates with previous reconstructions, continuously altering the memory's composition. Social interaction amplifies this redrawing. When you recount memories to others, their reactions, nods, questions, laughter, can modify your perception of the scene. Validation reinforces certain elements, while contradictions or misunderstandings subtly reshape others. Over time, shared recollections contribute to a collective reconstruction, blending individual memory with social context. Scenes are redrawn not only internally, but in dialogue with others, producing memories that are simultaneously personal and communal, subjective yet seemingly objective. The cumulative effect of these processes is profound. Over weeks, months, and years, the original imprint of a scene becomes increasingly obscured. What remains is a reconstructed version that is coherent, emotionally resonant, and believable. You trust it, live within it, and let it guide your perception of the past. Yet beneath its vivid surface lies a tapestry woven from imagination, inference, and reinterpretation. Alongside the fragments of actual experience, your brain redraws not just the scene itself, but its meaning, its emotional impact, and its place within the narrative of your life. This redrawing is essential for psychological continuity. Life is messy, fragmented, and often ambiguous. The mind cannot rely solely on raw impressions. It requires coherent scenes to make sense of experience, integrate lessons, and construct identity. By continuously redrawing old scenes, the brain transforms scattered fragments into usable, meaningful recollections. Memory becomes less about accuracy and more about functionality, guiding thought, decision-making, and emotional processing. And yet this ability comes with paradoxical consequences. The more vivid and coherent a memory feels, the more confident you become in its reality. The reconstructed scene, built layer by layer through repeated recall, often feels more real than the fleeting moment it represents. Memory becomes a living artwork, a dynamic creation, and a foundation upon which you construct understanding. What you hold as past is not simply what happened. It is what your brain has redrawn, in colors, textures, and emotions that evolve with you. Your brain redraws old scenes silently, invisibly, and endlessly. What you see in memory is not the original reality, but a living reconstruction, shaped by thought, emotion, and reflection, and imbued with a vividness that makes it feel undeniably real. Memory is not a neutral repository of events. It is an adaptive system, designed less to preserve factual accuracy than to support survival. Each recollection serves a purpose: to guide behavior, anticipate danger, foster learning, and maintain coherence of the self. In this sense, yesterday is not simply remembered, it is reconstructed for survival. The brain reshapes past experiences to make them meaningful, useful, and protective, ensuring that the lessons, warnings, and insights embedded within memory can guide present and future actions effectively. This reconstruction begins subtly. Memories are filtered through attention, emotion, and interpretation, which determine what is retained. emphasized, or diminished. Details irrelevant to survival or understanding may fade, while elements pertinent to safety, social cohesion, or problem-solving are strengthened. A past encounter may be remembered differently depending on what your current self needs to learn from it. Threats may be magnified, alliances reinforced, and errors highlighted. The mind does not merely store what happened, it edits the memory to produce a version that is instructive, coherent, and actionable. Emotion plays a central role in this adaptive reconstruction. Experiences tied to fear, joy, regret, or pride are prioritized because they carry survival-relevant information. Fearful moments may be exaggerated to heighten caution. Joyful moments may be emphasized to encourage behaviors that replicate rewards. Mistakes may be amplified to prevent future harm. The brain does not merely archive events, it evaluates them for significance, reshaping the past to align with the needs, vulnerabilities, and lessons required by the present self. In doing so, it ensures that memory serves as a guide, not just a record. Even ordinary experiences are colored by this process. Daily events, conversations, decisions, or minor conflicts are reconstructed to maintain social cohesion, moral understanding, or personal growth. You may remember acts of kindness as more generous than they were, or missteps as more instructive, because the reconstructed memory reinforces values, social bonds, and lessons that enhance your ability to navigate life. Past events are thus selectively shaped to optimize behavioral and emotional outcomes. Reconstruction for survival also involves filling gaps and rationalizing inconsistencies. Memory rarely provides a complete, coherent record. Fragments are supplemented, sequences adjusted, and causality imposed. The mind favors interpretations that reduce confusion, provide clarity, and support adaptive action. A misremembered warning may become a vivid cautionary tale. A forgotten failure may be remembered as a lesson in humility. In this way, yesterday is not fixed. It is an evolving resource, sculpted to maximize understanding, safety, and self-preservation. Social feedback reinforces survival-oriented reconstruction. Sharing memories with others, observing reactions, and aligning recollections with collective narratives help stabilize social bonds and validate interpretations. Collaborative memory often emphasizes lessons learned, threats avoided, and socially adaptive behavior. Memories evolve in response to both internal and external cues, ensuring that reconstructed yesterdays serve practical, survival-oriented functions beyond mere personal narrative. This process explains why traumatic memories often feel more vivid and emotionally charged than neutral events. The mind amplifies danger signals and emotionally salient details to promote vigilance, learning, and avoidance of future harm. Conversely, positive experiences can be reconstructed to encourage repetition of adaptive behaviors, reinforcing social cooperation, creativity, or resilience. Memory becomes a tool for navigating life, not a perfect record of it. Even as reconstruction bends the past, it preserves its utility. The precise factual accuracy of an event is less important than the meaning extracted from it. The lesson learned, the cautionary signal, the emotional resonance that informs present behavior. Survival is not served by perfect recall, but by functional recall. What matters is how yesterday informs today. The knowledge retained, the errors highlighted, the warnings encoded, and the insights reinforced. The reconstructed past equips the mind to respond effectively, anticipate challenges, and act with confidence. Yet this adaptive reconstruction also blurs the line between reality and invention. The memories that serve survival are often composites of fact, inference, and interpretation. You may remember threats as more severe, successes as more instructive, and failures as more meaningful than they objectively were. The past is tailored to support your ongoing survival, but the cost is a distortion of factual accuracy. Memory becomes a tool, a guide, a shield, and a reconstruction that feels undeniably real. Yesterday is reconstructed not to deceive, but to protect, to teach, to warn, and to guide, to transform fragmented experience into meaningful knowledge. And in this, memory reveals its ultimate function. Survival is more vital than fidelity, utility more vital than truth, and the reconstructed past is a living map for navigating the present and future. Memory is not merely a reflection of the past. It is a mirror of the present self. Each act of recollection is influenced, shaped, and often distorted by who you are now, your beliefs, emotions, knowledge, and desires. Recollections are not passive records. They are dynamic constructions molded by the current self. When you remember an event, your mind interprets, filters, and reshapes it according to your present perspective, values, and identity. The past does not exist independently of the present. It is continuously rewritten to align with the consciousness that recalls it. This molding begins the moment you retrieve a memory. Every detail you focus on, every sensation you emphasize, every interpretation you apply, is influenced by your current self. You unconsciously highlight aspects that affirm your identity, minimize elements that contradict it, and adjust emotional tones to match your present feelings. Over time, repeated recollections reinforce this alignment, creating memories that feel authentic yet increasingly reflect who you are now, rather than who you were then. The recollection becomes a dialogue between past and present, shaped more by interpretation than by original occurrence. Emotion plays a central role in this process. How you feel at the moment of recall influences which details you emphasize and which you suppress. Happiness may amplify warmth and connection in a memory. Sadness may highlight loss or regret. Pride may enhance personal achievements, and shame may exaggerate perceived failures. Your current emotional state imposes meaning and context upon past events, ensuring that the reconstructed memory resonates with your inner reality. Memory is not neutral. It is colored by the psychological lens of the present self. Beliefs and values also guide reconstruction. Memories are interpreted in ways that are consistent with your worldview, reinforcing coherence between past experiences and current understanding. A lesson learned may be emphasized. Moral or ethical failings may be amplified or minimized to align with your self-concept. Recollections that conflict with present beliefs may be reshaped, rationalized, or forgotten, while those that affirm identity are reinforced. Your memory becomes a reflection of your evolving worldview, a constantly updated narrative that integrates past events into the story of who you are now. Language and thought act as instruments of molding. The words you use internally or externally to describe a memory influence its reconstruction. Narratives impose sequence, emphasis, and meaning, reshaping sensory impressions and emotional content to align with the current self. Internal rehearsal, reflection, and storytelling all serve to refine and adjust recollections. Each act of reflection solidifies the influence of the present self, making the memory less a record of objective events and more a canvas painted with the colors of your current identity. Social interaction further reinforces this molding. Sharing memories with friends, family, or colleagues introduces feedback, affirmation, or reinterpretation that shapes recollections. Responses from others validate, challenge, or modify the memory, subtly integrating social context into its reconstruction. Over time, your recollections become co-authored between your present self and the social environment, producing memories that reflect not only personal interpretation, but also relational and cultural influences. The cumulative effect is striking. Over months and years, your memories of the past increasingly mirror your current self. Details may shift, emotions may be amplified, and events may be reframed to fit present understanding. What you remember is less the raw past, and more a reflection of who you have become. The reconstruction serves coherence, identity, and psychological stability, ensuring that memory supports your sense of self and your ability to navigate the present. This phenomenon explains why people often remember themselves differently than they actually were. Childhood memories may be idealized or vilified, teenage experiences reframed, and adult encounters adjusted to fit current identity. Memories are living narratives, continuously molded to support the story of who you are, rather than immutable records of who you were. The past is flexible, malleable, and intimately tied to the evolving self. Recollections molded by the current self reveal a profound truth. Memory is never purely about the past. It is an ongoing interaction between past events and present consciousness. A dynamic process in which your identity shapes, colors, and interprets what you remember. The act of remembering is not passive. It is an active construction in which the present self is both author and editor, creating a past that aligns with the mind that recalls it. Memory is never merely history. It is a reflection of who you are now, a canvas continually repainted by thought, emotion, and identity, and a bridge between the self that was and the self that is. Memory is not fixed. It is a living dialogue between past and present. What you remember is constantly reinterpreted, and the meaning you assign to past events evolves as your understanding, values, and perspective change. The past is not immutable. It is fluid, shifting with each insight, emotion, or revelation. When you revisit a memory, you do more than recall. It is an act of reinterpretation, where the original events are imbued with new significance. The same moment can feel entirely different, depending on who you are, what you have learned, and what you need to understand at that point in your life. This process begins unconsciously. Even minor reflections on a past event can reshape its perceived importance. A small act of kindness might be amplified in retrospect to signify deep affection, or a minor misstep might be reframed as a critical lesson. Your mind filters experiences through the lens of accumulated knowledge, current beliefs, and emotional context. What seemed trivial or confusing at the time may now appear profound, and what once seemed important may fade into insignificance. Memory is selective, and reinterpretation assigns the meaning that the present self finds most valuable. Emotion plays a powerful role in this transformation. The way you feel now dictates the weight, tone, and significance of past events. Joyful recollections may be romanticized, painful memories softened or recast as opportunities for growth, and regrets reframed as lessons. The past is not objective. It is a mirror reflecting your current emotional landscape. Every act of remembrance is filtered through the mind's emotional lens, subtly changing the meaning of events and creating a past that is emotionally coherent and psychologically adaptive. The reinterpretation of memory is also guided by cognition. As you gain knowledge, develop insights, or experience new situations, old memories are recontextualized. A failed project may later be seen as a stepping stone, a lost relationship as a lesson in self-awareness, a moment of embarrassment as a source of humor. New understanding reshapes old events, ensuring that the past remains relevant and instructive. Memory is not static. It is continually updated with meaning that serves present comprehension and future decision-making. Language and internal narrative reinforce these shifts. Describing an event, even silently in thought, imposes interpretation, causality, and structure. Words frame the memory, highlighting certain aspects and downplaying others. Repetition of the narrative solidifies the new meaning, embedding it so deeply that it feels intrinsic to the original event. Over time, the memory you experience is inseparable from the reinterpretation, and the new meaning becomes indistinguishable from fact. Social and cultural contexts contribute as well. Interactions with others, shared stories, and collective reflections influence how you understand and remember past events. Recollections may be adjusted to align with cultural values, social norms, or relational dynamics. The past is constantly negotiated, shaped by both personal reflection and communal context, and meaning is assigned to ensure coherence, relevance, and psychological alignment with the present environment. The cumulative effect is profound. The same event can hold multiple, evolving interpretations across time, each valid within its context. Memory is not a single, unchanging truth, but a dynamic landscape, continuously reimagined and reconstructed. Past events are colored by lessons learned, insights gained, and perspectives acquired, creating a fluid history that evolves alongside the individual. What you remember today may differ in meaning from what you recalled last year or will recall in the future. This phenomenon reveals the adaptability and resilience of memory. By allowing the past to be reinterpreted, the mind ensures that experiences remain meaningful, instructive, and emotionally coherent. Memories are not just records. They are tools for understanding, growth, and survival. Yet this adaptability comes at the cost of objective accuracy. The past is continuously reshaped, often diverging from its original form, and the line between what actually happened and the meaning imposed upon it becomes blurred. Past changed by new meaning demonstrates that memory is not passive. It is an active process in which events are reinterpreted reconstructed, and imbued with significance. The past is alive, continually shifting to resonate with the present. And every recollection carries the imprint of who you are now and what you need to understand. Memory is not a neutral reflection of the past. It is an adaptive, creative process that paints what you need rather than what actually occurred. Each act of recall is influenced by your current desires, fears, values, and expectations. When you remember, your mind does not simply retrieve events. It reconstructs them, filling in gaps, emphasizing relevance, and shaping the narrative to serve present psychological, emotional, or practical needs. In essence, memory is a canvas, and your consciousness wields the brush, crafting images that align with your present self. This process begins unconsciously. Even minor recollections are subtly guided by need. If you are seeking reassurance, your memory may emphasize moments of success, kindness, or validation. If you are seeking caution, memories of mistakes, failures, or danger may be magnified. The brain prioritizes information that serves immediate psychological or adaptive goals, ensuring that recollections provide utility beyond mere recollection. What you remember is rarely a neutral fact. It is a tailored construction that meets current requirements. Emotion is a primary driver in this adaptive painting. Strong feelings influence which details are accentuated, which events are foregrounded, and which are minimized. Memories tied to anxiety, love, pride, or grief are reconstructed to resonate with ongoing emotional states. Joy can brighten and soften recollections. Fear can intensify shadows, and regret can highlight perceived errors. Memory becomes a reflection not only of past events, but of present emotional needs, painting scenes that feel vivid and meaningful in ways that support your current psyche. Cognition and perspective further guide this creative reconstruction. Insights, lessons, or knowledge gained since the original event reshape how it is recalled. A failure may be remembered as a learning opportunity, a difficult interaction as a moment of personal growth, or a trivial detail as symbolically significant. Your memory does not preserve events objectively. It selectively renders them in a way that aligns with what you need to learn, understand, or integrate. In this way, memory is both instructive and adaptive, serving survival, growth, and self-coherence. Language and narrative structure play crucial roles. Internal storytelling imposes order, emphasizes particular details, and embeds meaning into the memory. Even silent reflection can reshape scenes, intensify emotions, and adjust interpretations to meet present needs. Through repetition and contemplation, these reconstructed memories solidify, becoming as vivid and authoritative as any original perception. What you remember becomes inseparable from the version painted by your current self. Social influence also shapes these reconstructions. Sharing memories, observing reactions, or aligning recollections with cultural or relational norms guides what is emphasized or suppressed. The memory you retain may be subtly adjusted to reinforce belonging, approval, or identity within a group. Collective feedback, affirmation, and interpretation help your mind create memories that serve both personal needs and social coherence. In this way, memory functions as a dynamic interface between inner necessity and external context. The consequences are profound. Your recollections are not objective archives, but adaptive constructions tailored to your needs. The past is continuously repainted, with each retrieval adding layers of meaning, emphasis, and emotional resonance. Over time, these reconstructions become so vivid and coherent that they feel more real than the original events. Memory becomes a personalized art form, reflecting not only what happened, but what you required from the past to navigate the present. This phenomenon explains why memory is selective, subjective, and sometimes inconsistent. Conflicting recollections, reconstructed details, and altered narratives are not signs of failure. They are evidence of memory's purpose to serve the needs of the present self. By painting the past according to what is necessary, the mind creates coherence, meaning, and guidance. Memories are tools, teaching, warning, consoling, or reinforcing identity, rather than mere records of events. Memory paints what you need, with subtlety and precision. It fills gaps, emphasizes significance, and colors experiences to match current understanding and emotion. The past is a canvas, and each act of recollection adds strokes that make it functional, coherent, and alive. Memory is not a mirror of reality. It is an artist, crafting images to guide, teach, and sustain the self. Memories do not remain evenly detailed across the lifespan. Some grow sharper, richer, and more vivid with time, while others dissolve into vague impressions, blurred outlines, or emotional residues. The mind selectively sharpens what it considers significant and blurs what it no longer needs, sculpting the past according to relevance, meaning, and psychological utility. Old stories do not fade randomly. They evolve, sharpened by purpose or softened by irrelevance, becoming reflections of what matters to your current self. This sharpening begins with emotional intensity. Memories tied to strong feelings, fear, love, regret, pride, remain crisp because they carry signals essential for understanding behavior, protecting safety, and guiding decision-making. These memories remain vividly accessible, not because they are more important historically, but because the emotional charge embedded within them anchors them to the mind's survival and identity mechanisms. Emotion binds memory, sharpening certain details while allowing others to fall away. A moment of danger may retain every sensory nuance, while an ordinary day disappears entirely. Blurring, on the other hand, is a natural consequence of the brain's need to conserve cognitive resources. Information that lacks relevance, emotional resonance, or meaning gradually fades into abstraction. The human mind does not preserve unnecessary detail. It simplifies, compresses, and streamlines. Old stories become vague, not because they disappear, but because they are pruned, leaving only the conceptual skeleton, an impression, a lesson, a feeling, without the noise of sensory detail. Memory fades selectively, guided by the needs and values of the present self. Narrative plays a powerful role in sharpening and blurring. The stories you tell yourself, internally or externally, determine which details are emphasized and which are lost. Repetition reinforces clarity, solidifying certain elements while allowing others to decay. A memory retold becomes sharper, more polished, and more coherent, shaped by the act of storytelling. Meanwhile, unspoken memories blur, fragment, and drift into the background. Each act of narration is an editing process that determines the fate of the past, sharpened into permanence or blurred into obscurity. Identity further influences this selective clarity. Memories that affirm your self-concept, your values, beliefs, strengths, or struggles tend to sharpen because they support psychological coherence. They become part of the narrative you use to understand who you are. In contrast, memories that contradict your identity may blur, fade, or fragment, not through deliberate avoidance, but through natural cognitive alignment. The mind protects self-consistency by preserving clarity where it reinforces identity and allowing ambiguity where it challenges it. The past becomes a curated archive, shaped by who you believe yourself to be. Time itself contributes to this dynamic. As you grow and evolve, your relationship with past events changes. What once felt significant may lose meaning. What once seemed minor may gain profound relevance. The memory sharpens, not because the event changes, but because your understanding of its meaning deepens. Similarly, a once important moment may blur because its lesson has been absorbed or its emotional charge has diminished. Time is not neutral. It actively reshapes the contours of memory, creating peaks of clarity and valleys of obscurity. Cognitive biases amplify this process. Confirmation bias sharpens memories that support current beliefs, while dissonant memories blur or fragment. Hindsight bias sharpens memories to fit current understanding, making the past feel inevitable. Negativity bias may intensify painful memories, while positivity bias softens them to protect emotional well-being. These biases sculpt the landscape of memory, determining what remains sharp and what dissolves into blur. The past becomes a mosaic, shaped by psychological tendencies, emotional needs, and mental shortcuts. Social influence also contributes. Story sharing with others reinforces certain memories, sharpening them through collective affirmation. At the same time, stories that receive little acknowledgement or validation may fade, their details blurring as they lose social relevance. Cultural narratives, family dynamics, and relational feedback all sculpt the clarity of memories. A story can sharpen into myth or blur into silence, depending on its resonance within the social environment. Despite these shifts, the mind rarely loses the essence of memory. Even blurred recollections carry emotional or thematic weight. They may lack detail, but retain meaning, an impression, a sense, a trace of what mattered. The sharpening and blurring of memory is not a flaw. It is a functional adaptation. The mind preserves what serves growth, understanding, and coherence, while releasing what no longer provides value. Old stories sharpen where meaning grows, and blur where meaning fades. The past is not fixed. It is sculpted by attention, emotion, identity, and time. Your memories are not archives, but evolving landscapes, revealing what matters to the self that remembers. Every time you revisit a memory, you are not simply observing the past, you are altering it. The act of remembering is not passive retrieval, it is active reconstruction. Your brain rebuilds the event from fragments, impressions, and emotions, guided by who you are in the present moment. In doing so, you change details, shift meanings, adjust emotional tones, and reshape the event itself. Remembering becomes an act of rewriting, and each remembrance moves the memory further away from what originally happened. This happens because memory is not stored like a video. It is encoded in scattered neural patterns across the brain. When you recall an event, these fragments must be gathered and reassembled. The reconstruction depends on your current emotions, beliefs, needs, and interpretations. If you are happy today, the memory may feel lighter. If you are anxious, it may feel darker. Your present state influences the past you retrieve. The moment you remember it, the memory becomes vulnerable, softened, and reshaped by the conditions under which it is recalled. Emotion is the most powerful sculptor. A memory recalled in anger becomes harsher. Recalled in regret, it grows heavier. Recalled in nostalgia, it becomes sweeter. The emotional filter through which you revisit the past determines the version you store afterward. The original imprint is overridden, replaced by the reconstructed version. This is why a memory can evolve drastically across years, not because the past changes, but because each recollection edits it, layering new interpretations upon old impressions. Your identity also plays a central role in this transformation. As you change, your memories change with you. A moment that once felt embarrassing may later feel humorous. A relationship once painful may later feel enlightening. This shift is not random. Your mind adjusts memories to maintain coherence between who you are now and who you once were. Events that don't fit your evolving self-image are softened, reframed, or transformed. Memory aligns the past with the narrative your present self needs to believe. Language reinforces these changes. Every time you describe a memory, even silently in your head, you impose structure, emphasis, and interpretation. You choose certain details to highlight and others to ignore. You craft a narrative, and with each retelling, the narrative strengthens. The story becomes the memory. The more you recall an event, the more it becomes shaped by the words you use to describe it. Eventually, what you remember is no longer the event itself, but the version you've narrated into existence. Social influence deepens this effect. When you share a memory, others respond with empathy, disbelief, humor, or curiosity. Their reactions validate certain details and dismiss others. This social feedback subtly alters the memory you store afterward. The memory becomes co-authored, shaped not only by your mind, but by the reflections of those who listen. Over time, the event becomes a blend of personal experience and social interpretation, far removed from the original moment. Cognitive processes further ensure that recalling a memory changes it. The brain updates the stored version based on new information, current beliefs, or emotional insights. This process, called reconsolidation, is the physiological foundation of memory alteration. Once a memory is recalled, it becomes unstable, open to modification. When it is stored again, it carries traces of the present moment. This means that remembering is inherently transformative. The past becomes intertwined with the present every time you bring it into consciousness. The implications are profound. You do not carry the past. You carry the versions of the past that your mind has rewritten across time. Each recollection moves it further from its original state, blending truth with interpretation, fact with emotion, and history with identity. The certainty you feel when recalling an event is not proof of accuracy. It is proof of the brain's confidence in the reconstructed story. Memory feels real because the mind needs coherence, not because it preserves objective truth. This phenomenon explains why people misremember events with absolute conviction, why siblings recall the same childhood differently, why old arguments evolve with time, and why personal histories shift as individuals grow. The past you remember is not the past that happened. It is the past you reconstructed through countless moments of recollection, each influenced by your evolving self. Every act of remembering is an act of revision. Every return to the past alters its shape. The more you revisit a memory, the more it belongs to the person you are now, and the less it resembles the person you once were. Memory is not a recording, it is an alchemy. And the strangest part of this silent chemistry is how effortlessly the mind pours imagination into the cracks of what truly happened. You may believe the past sits behind you like a fixed landscape, untouched by time, untouched by desire, untouched by fear. But the truth is far more unsettling. The moment imagination touches a memory, you can no longer separate what was real from what was created. And the worst part? Your brain doesn't warn you when it edits the past. It does it behind the curtain, in the dark theater you call certainty. Every memory you carry is a blend, part fact, part emotion, part fear, part wish. This mixture creates something that feels more real than reality ever was, because imagination amplifies what the event meant to you rather than what the event actually contained. A moment from childhood might feel warm because your adult mind wants it to be. A conversation may feel darker in retrospect because your current self needs it to match the person you've become. You think you remember the sequence of events clearly, but even your certainty is suspect. You may not realize that the vividness you feel is not a sign of accuracy. It is a sign of emotional importance. Your brain remembers how it felt far more than how it truly was. This is why nostalgia is dangerous. When you look backward with longing, your mind paints soft edges on harsh moments, adding imagined tenderness where there never was any. You create scenes that never existed, dialogues that were never spoken, forgiveness that never happened. The imagined past becomes more attractive than the real one, and you begin to grieve a world you never lived in. Your longing becomes for a version of yourself that you invented after the fact. The same happens with pain. Memory adds shadows that were not there originally. A mistake grows heavier each time you revisit it. A failure becomes larger, darker, more defining. You add imagined details that serve your current emotional narrative. Something small becomes catastrophic because you replay it as the person you are now, not the person you were then. Your present fear shapes your past suffering, making moments feel worse than they ever were. Memory is not passive, it is a sculptor of internal worlds. And imagination is not merely a background accomplice. It is the primary tool. Every time a memory is recalled, it becomes malleable again. This is the moment imagination slips in, unnoticed. It fills missing frames of experience. It creates transitions between events. It paints expressions on faces you never actually saw clearly. It writes intentions behind actions that were likely never intended. It creates villains and heroes based on your current emotional needs. The mind does not like gaps, so it fills them with creativity disguised as truth. You have likely experienced it without knowing. You remember being certain someone said a specific sentence, but later they insist they never did. You recall being sure an object was placed in a certain location, yet it was never there. You remember someone's behavior as cold or distant, but the version of them living in their own memory remembers you as the one who pulled away. Each mind imagines a slightly different story, and these imagined additions merge with memory until both sides believe with full conviction that their version is the real one. Think about your earliest memories. They are not memories at all. They are reconstructions built from stories told by others, photographs you've seen, or emotions you projected backwards. You cannot remember your third birthday. You only remember the picture of the cake and the smile someone once described, but the memory feels real. You believe in it, even though imagination is the one holding it together. Memory mixing with imagination is also why dreams sometimes feel indistinguishable from the past. A vivid dream can easily integrate itself into your memory bank because the brain stores imagination and experience using overlapping systems. When you later recall a faint dream, your brain may treat it as something experienced. Eventually, you cannot separate the imagined from the lived. Your mind becomes a museum where fictional moments stand beside real ones, and you walk through both without distinction. The unsettling truth is this: imagination does not contaminate memory. It completes it. Your mind is not interested in preserving the past accurately. It is interested in preserving a coherent story of who you believe yourself to be. So it mixes real and imagined without hesitation, and the past you carry becomes an evolving biography, written by the present version of you who is trying to survive. If you were to strip imagination away, your memories would collapse into fragments, flashes, broken pieces. You would lose your sense of identity because so much of who you are depends on the imagined narratives you've unconsciously added to your memories. You need the illusions. You need the invented details. You need the softened edges and the exaggerated shadows. Without them, the past becomes uninhabitable. Memory mixing with imagination is not a flaw. It is a feature. But knowing this forces you to question something deeper than the accuracy of your past. It forces you to question the authenticity of the person you have become. Because if your memories are partly imagined, then your identity built upon those memories is partly imagined as well. You are not simply shaped by what happened. You are shaped by what you believe happened, what you imagine happened, and what you need to have happened in order to make sense of yourself. In the end, memory does not separate the real from the imagined. And neither do you. Because the distinction never mattered to your mind. Only the story did. The past does not sit behind you like an untouched archive. It bends, reshapes, and reorganizes itself every time your beliefs change. You assume the past is stable because it feels distant, sealed, completed. But memory does not store the past. It stores the story of the past, and stories are always rewritten to match the narrator. Who you are now silently edits who you used to be. Your beliefs today reach backward like invisible hands, altering meanings, rewriting motives, and reconstructing entire scenes to maintain psychological symmetry. You never notice it happening. A belief changes within you, a new worldview, a new self-image, a new emotional pattern, and suddenly your memories adjust themselves to support that belief, as if the past always agreed with your present self. This illusion keeps you feeling consistent, even when nothing about you is consistent at all. For example, if you now believe you always knew better, the past version of you becomes wiser than they truly were. If you now think of yourself as someone who was constantly misunderstood, the memories of others shift, becoming colder, harsher, more dismissive. If you adopt the belief that you were never appreciated, your mind filters past events to highlight only the moments that support that feeling. The rest, the warmth, the support, the affection gets dimmed, forgotten, or erased completely. Beliefs act like lenses, and memory keeps adjusting the picture, so you never realize you're wearing glasses. Your past becomes aligned to your current worldview, not because it was always that way, but because your mind needs the illusion of a coherent self. To admit that you once saw the world differently would fracture the story, and so the edits continue silently. You might look back at a relationship and believe it was meant to fail from the beginning, but that belief only arose after the ending, not during the experience itself. Now that you are older, more wounded, or more self-protective, your mind retrofits memories to match the narrative. I should have known. The signs were always there. It was never right. But if you could see the unedited version of your feelings from that time, you would see someone hopeful, someone uncertain, someone alive with conflicting impulses. Yet your present belief refuses to tolerate that complexity. You believe you are consistent, but consistency is something your memory fabricates. Think about how you reinterpret your childhood when your adult beliefs shift about family, about responsibility, about trauma. You reinterpret events that were once neutral. You assign intention to actions you didn't understand as a child. You declare moments meaningful only because they resonate with who you are now. A harmless comment becomes an insult. A strict rule becomes oppression. A small act of kindness becomes evidence that someone cared more than you realized. The past bends because your beliefs demand a version of it that supports your current identity. Even your memories of yourself change. When you believe you are stronger now, your past self becomes weaker by contrast. When you believe you are more broken, your past becomes darker. When you adopt spiritual beliefs, you reinterpret old coincidences as signs. When you lose faith, you reinterpret old miracles as delusions. Your beliefs sculpt your history more than your history shapes your beliefs. And this is not a random flaw, it is a survival mechanism. Your mind continually updates your narrative so you can function. If you held on to all versions of yourself at once, you would drown in contradictions. You would be 1,000 different people arguing inside a single skull. So memory steps in and creates a clean storyline, smoothing over inconsistencies, erasing the versions of you that no longer fit who you must be today. The terrifying part is that this process feels like honesty. When your beliefs shift, the new interpretation of your past feels more accurate than the original experience ever did. Your mind gives you the confidence of truth while providing none of its reliability. You walk through life believing you finally see the past clearly, without realizing you are simply seeing the past through new philosophical architecture. Even guilt changes this way. When you believe you are responsible, you rewrite memories to exaggerate your role. When you believe you are helpless, you soften your involvement. When you believe the world is unfair, the past becomes filled with injustices. When you believe you deserved more, the past becomes filled with overlooked opportunities. Belief does not just affect memory, it controls it. Imagine for a moment a version of your past, untouched by your present beliefs, a raw, unedited timeline. It would feel alien. It would contradict your current self-image. It would expose the many selves you once were, the selves you have forgotten, buried, or overwritten. You would see a person who didn't share your current worldview, who didn't think like you, who didn't fear what you fear now. That person might even shock you. They might disappoint you, or you might envy them. But because this version would destabilize your sense of continuity, your mind hides it behind revisions. Your memory becomes a book rewritten after every chapter you live. Every belief you adopt, moral, emotional, philosophical, reinterprets everything behind you. A moment of joy becomes foolish in hindsight. A moment of fear becomes prophetic. A moment of confusion becomes meaningful. A moment of love becomes delusion. A moment of regret becomes destiny. Not because the moment changed, but because you did. Belief is the editor, and memory is the obedient text. And the most disorienting truth is this: if your beliefs change again tomorrow, the past will change again with them. The story will rearrange itself once more. Characters will shift roles. Motives will evolve. Scenes will acquire new interpretations. You will swear the new version is the real one, just as confidently as you swear the current version is real today. The past does not serve truth. It serves identity, and identity is always under revision. Your beliefs write your history. Your memories obey, and the past becomes whatever your present self needs it to be. When you remember an emotion, you are not feeling the past. You are feeling the present, pretending to be the past. This is the unsettling nature of emotional memory. Every time you recall how you once felt, the emotion gets rewritten by the state you are in now. You think you are revisiting old feelings, but you are actually creating new feelings and assigning them to old moments. Memory does not store emotions the way you believe. It stores traces, impressions, shadows, and every time you recall them, you repaint them with colors borrowed from who you are today. You might look back on a moment you once thought was joyful and find it strangely hollow now, or recall a moment of sadness and realize it feels heavier than it ever did at the time. Your present emotional climate seeps into the recalled emotion, altering it silently. A heartbreak from years ago might feel sharper today, not because the pain has returned, but because the version of you who remembers it is more fragile, more introspective, more wounded. The original feeling may have been lighter, but recall has rewritten it into something deeper. Your mind does this without warning, without hesitation, without remorse. Recall is not an act of revisiting. It is an act of rewriting. Think about how you remember childhood fears. At the time, the fear may have been quick, simple, instinctive, but when you recall it, as an adult, it becomes profound, symbolic, meaningful. You reinterpret what you felt, using the emotional vocabulary you developed later in life. The fear becomes something else entirely, a metaphor, a lesson, a wound, a prophecy. The original feeling disappears under layers of reinterpretation. Your memories of love work the same way. When you are lonely, past love feels softer, sweeter, more precious. When you are hurt, the same memories feel painful, confusing, manipulative. When you are indifferent, they feel meaningless. The emotion shifts depending on who you are at the moment of recall, not who you were at the moment of experience. Your present emotional truth overwrites your past emotional truth. You think you are remembering accurately, but you are only remembering consistently with your current self, not your past self. This is why two people can recall the same event with completely different emotional interpretations. It isn't because one is lying. It's because each person is remembering through the filter of who they are now. A moment of conflict may feel justified to you, but cruel to someone else. A moment of vulnerability may now feel embarrassing to you, but courageous to another person involved. Memory recreates emotional realities that fit each person's internal narrative. Your brain does not store feelings the way it stores facts. It stores the meaning you assigned to the feeling. And meaning is the most unstable thing you possess. Even the emotions you swear were unmistakable, indescribable joy, unbearable pain, deep connection, intense fear, are not safe from revision. When you recall intense emotion, the brain reconstructs it using your current emotional architecture. If you have grown more resilient, the pain you recall becomes less overwhelming. If you have grown more insecure, the joy you recall becomes tinged with doubt. If you have grown more distant, the love you recall becomes a misunderstanding. Your emotional memory is not a window, it is a mirror. Emotional recall also amplifies or minimizes feeling based on what your present self wants to believe. If you want to see yourself as someone who has overcome great suffering, your recalled pain becomes more dramatic. If you want to see yourself as someone who was never truly cared for, your recalled joy becomes dimmer. If you want to see yourself as someone who has healed, your recalled trauma softens. Your emotional identity dictates the emotional color of your memories. There are also times when you cannot recall how you felt at all. You remember the event, the details, the faces, but the emotional weight is gone. This absence is not failure, it is transformation. Your present emotional state has no use for that old feeling, so it lets the trace fade. Recall does not revive forgotten emotion. It replaces it with a new emotional interpretation. This can be terrifying, because it means you cannot truly know what you once felt. You cannot revisit the emotional truth of your past. You only revisit the emotional truth of your present, self-projected backward. Even grief, one of the most intense human experiences, changes drastically over time, not because the original grief fades, but because each recall reshapes it. At first it feels like loss. Later it becomes acceptance. Later still it becomes nostalgia. Eventually it becomes a story you tell, rather than a pain you feel. The original emotional experience disappears long before you realize it. And perhaps the most disturbing part is this. The more often you recall an emotion, the further you move from its original form. Emotional memory decays through repetition, not through forgetting. Each recall is a translation, and every translation introduces errors, distortions, interpretations. You are not remembering how you felt. You are remembering the last time you remembered how you felt. The chain of revision grows more complex with every revisit. This is why certain moments feel different each time you think about them. Why your past becomes unstable. Why you sometimes question your own story. Why the emotions you swear you felt may never have existed in the form you imagine. Recall is not preservation. It is recreation. And in that recreation, Your past emotional reality dissolves, replaced by something shaped by who you must be today. The feeling you remember is never the feeling you lived, because memory rewrites emotion every time you return to it, and the past becomes emotionally compatible with the person you've become, not the person you were. Every time you revisit a memory, the scene updates itself, not because you choose to alter it, but because your mind cannot retrieve anything without rewriting it. Memory is not a file you open, it is a world you rebuild, and each time you rebuild it, the architecture shifts, details move, emotions shift, motivations change. The past becomes a living document, constantly revised to accommodate the person you are now. When you recall an old moment, you assume you're stepping back into a preserved room, but you're entering a reconstruction, one assembled in the present, with present tools, influenced by present needs. The original room no longer exists. It hasn't for years. Maybe it never did. What you revisit is the latest version of the memory, freshly edited every time you access it. Your brain cannot retrieve a memory without simultaneously modifying it. Recall is the update. Imagine a scene from your childhood, a classroom, a street, a conversation, a moment of fear or excitement. Each time you recall it, something shifts. A face becomes clearer or blurrier. A color brightens or fades. A word that was never spoken appears in the memory because it fits the emotional truth you believe now. A gesture becomes sharper. A detail becomes symbolic. Another vanishes entirely. Recollection is revision. Old scenes update themselves the way stories evolve each time they're retold. Old memories drift with each revisit. And the strangest part? The changes feel natural. You do not notice the edits. You do not sense the reconstruction. The new version feels just as real, if not more real, than any previous version. You walk away believing you have strengthened the memory, when in fact, you have altered it further from the original form. They adapt. They mutate. They evolve. Memory is not loyal to what happened. If you now see yourself as more confident, your memories of past insecurity lose their intensity. You remember yourself standing taller, speaking clearer, being braver than you truly were. The updated scene supports the identity you want to maintain. It is loyal to what makes sense now. Old scenes update themselves quietly, automatically, without your permission. Each recall adds fresh paint to an old painting. The brush strokes blend, and the original colors disappear under layers of reinterpretation. If you now see yourself as wounded, broken, or neglected, your memories darken. Moments that were once neutral become evidence of someone's coldness. Interactions you barely noticed at the time become turning points. The updated scene supports the emotional narrative you believe today. You might swear that you remember the expression on someone's face during an important conversation, but that expression was reconstructed during one of your later recollections. You might swear you remember the exact sequence of events during a moment of conflict, but sequence is one of the first things memory reconstructs. You might swear you remember the tone of someone's voice, but tone is one of the most easily distorted elements of a memory, often replaced by the tone you now believe they must have used. When you recall, your mind fills in missing pieces, using your current understanding. Your knowledge today colors what you think you knew then. Your fears today color what frightened you then. Your relationships today color how you interpret past interactions. Your emotional state today colors the emotional climate of the old memory. Every update makes the scene feel more accurate, more vivid, more certain, yet less connected to the original event. Repetition does not strengthen memory. Repetition reshapes memory. Each time you return to a scene, you distort it further. Each time you think you're remembering, you're overriding. Each time you revisit the past, you move farther from it. This is why eyewitness accounts change over time. This is why you are shocked when old photos or journals contradict what you remember. This is why you argue with someone about the details of something you both experienced. Your brain is not malfunctioning. It is doing exactly what it evolved to do. Memory updates old scenes to maintain coherence, identity, and meaning in the present moment. It edits the past to support your beliefs, protect your ego, and maintain emotional stability. The past becomes flexible because flexibility is useful. A rigid past would trap you. A malleable past allows you to reorganize your story as needed. And so the reconstruction continues. The more important a memory is to you. Sometimes the updates are subtle. A shift in lighting, a change in tone, a missing detail replaced by a likely guess. Other times the updates are dramatic. Entire conversations rewritten, entire moods altered, entire motivations reassigned. Even the big memories, the ones that feel foundational, the ones that define who you are not immune. They change the most because you revisit them the most. The further it drifts from what originally happened. What remains is not the event, but the meaning you have built around it. Your past evolves every time you touch it. Meaning rewrites scenes more aggressively than time ever could. Old scenes update themselves because memory cannot retrieve anything without leaving fingerprints on it. Each recall is a reconstruction. Each reconstruction becomes the new version. Each new version feels final until the next time you remember, when the scene updates once again without your awareness. Your memories breathe, shift, reform, and disguise themselves. Nothing stays original. Nothing stays exact. The past is not stable. Nothing remains untouched by the present. It is a living organism, and you rewrite it every time you remember. Yesterday is recreated, not recovered. Your memory does not store entire days, entire conversations, entire experiences. It stores fragments, thin shards of sensation, emotion, impressions, flashes. Everything you think of as yesterday is rebuilt from scattered pieces, stitched together into a narrative that feels whole only because your mind hates incompleteness. You never remember the full picture. You assemble it. When you try to recall an event, your mind does not pull up a complete recording. It gathers fragments scattered across different regions of the brain. A sound from one corner, a color from another, a feeling stored separately, a detail guessed, a gap filled with assumption, a sequence rearranged. And while stitching these pieces together, the brain smooths over the seams so you never notice how much is missing. Your memory of yesterday or last week or 10 years ago is not a preserved truth. It is a reconstruction built from fragments that survived time and fragments invented to fill what time erased. The result feels coherent. But coherence is a performance, not evidence. What you recall is not what happened. It is what you were able to rebuild. This is why memories feel incomplete until you try to explain them. The moment you try to put a memory into words, you begin assembling a narrative from scraps. Your brain takes the fragments you do have and forces them into a storyline that seems logical. You assume the story existed that way all along, but the story is created by the act of remembering. Fragments come first. Story comes last. Meaning comes second. And every time you rebuild yesterday, you build it differently. Yesterday bends according to what you feel today. Sometimes the fragments you retrieve are influenced by your current emotions. If you are sad, the fragments you find are tinged with sadness. If you are angry, the fragments you recall are those that validate your anger. If you are nostalgic, the fragments appear softer, warmer, almost glowing. Emotion acts like a magnet, pulling certain fragments into the foreground and pushing others into the shadow. You think you remember the expression on someone's face. Other times, the fragments simply degrade. Memories fade, not because the brain forgets, but because the connections weaken. Details dissolve, colors lose clarity, sensory imprints fade. And when those pieces vanish, the brain replaces them with something approximate, something symbolic, something borrowed from other memories or expectations. These replacements feel authentic, even though they never happened. Most of your memories contain details that were never part of the original moment. They were inserted to complete the picture, like missing puzzle pieces replaced with shapes that almost fit. But much of that is reconstruction, logical guesses based on how you now interpret the moment. You think you remember the exact words spoken. You think you remember the tone, the timing, the meaning. Memory is a puzzle you complete using pieces from multiple puzzles. Your mental timeline becomes a collage, visually coherent, emotionally convincing, but assembled from mismatched pieces. Even the fragments themselves are unstable. The more often you revisit a memory, the more the fragments shift. Some sharpen, some blur, some detach from their original context and attach themselves to entirely different events. A detail from one day becomes fused with a detail from another. A feeling from one moment gets layered onto a memory where it never belonged. If you could see your memories before reconstruction, they would appear as scattered dots, disconnected flashes, the sensation of cold air on your skin, the sound of a distant voice, a half-formed impression of someone's gaze, the outline of an object, a spike of emotion, a fragment of thought. Nothing complete, nothing coherent. But the fragments tell a different story. And because your mind wants everything to appear seamless, it hides the stitching, it hides the missing fragments, it hides the artificial pieces added to make the story whole. You never see the reconstruction process. You only see the final version, and you trust it as if it were an unedited truth. Your mind fills the rest. It invents the middle. It invents the transitions, because the alternative is unbearable. It invents continuity where none exists. It invents reasons, motives, interpretations. A life experienced in fragments, without story, without meaning. But even the fragments you rely on were shaped by previous reconstructions. So you rebuild yesterday from pieces, convinced the reconstruction is accurate. It is the product of many rebuilds. And each rebuild moves you further from the original moment. Your memory of a memory is not the memory itself. Your identity depends on these reconstructions. Without them, you would not be able to explain who you are, where you came from, or why you made certain choices. The continuity of your life is upheld by fragments stitched into stories, but the stories were always fabricated from incomplete pieces. What makes this unsettling is the realization that you cannot escape this cycle. You cannot access the original version of your past. You cannot retrieve a raw, unprocessed memory. The moment you attempt to look back, reconstruction begins automatically. Yesterday becomes what you can reconstruct, not what you lived. You never remember. You only rebuild. And yesterday, no matter how certain it feels, is always a new construction over old fragments. An interpretation shaped by time, emotion, belief, and the constant rewriting of your internal story, filling the gaps. The past you rely on exists only because your mind needs the illusion of coherence. And so it keeps rebuilding yesterday from whatever fragments remain, sharpening the edges, smoothing the cracks, inventing the missing pieces, until yesterday becomes something you can live with. Not something that truly happened. Every time a memory rises from the depths of your mind, it does not arrive as a preserved artifact. It arrives as a reconstruction, rebuilt, repainted, subtly updated to match the person you are now. What you recall is never identical to what actually happened. It is shaped by who you have become, molded by the emotions you carry today, and filtered through the beliefs you now hold. In this way, your mind does something extraordinary and unsettling. It reshapes former moments so they align with the present version of you. The original incident remains buried somewhere in the past, untouched and unreachable, while the memory you hold is a living, evolving interpretation. You think you are remembering what happened, but you are really remembering the last time you remembered it, and that version was shaped by a self who no longer exists. This reshaping is subtle, almost invisible. A conversation from years ago may feel sharper now, more intense, more meaningful, but that sharpness comes not from the past itself, but from the emotional tools you carry in the present. If you've grown more self-confident, an old argument may feel less threatening. If you've become anxious, a harmless moment from childhood might now appear darker. Your mind updates the emotional texture of every memory so that it fits your current mental landscape. The past bends, not out of deception, but out of necessity. Your mind cannot retrieve a perfect recording, so it recreates something that feels right for who you are now. This reshaping happens not only with feelings, but also with details. A room may look brighter in your memory than it ever was. Someone's tone might seem gentler, harsher, or more distant. Entire fragments of conversation can be subtly rewritten to match the meaning you now attach to that moment. You may believe you are recalling facts, but memory rarely deals in facts. It deals in stories. Stories crafted in the present, about the past, for the benefit of the self who needs them. And because the stories feel natural, you rarely question just how much of them your mind silently changed. Your mind reshapes the past, because the past is not meant to remain untouched, it is meant to serve you. Your identity is not built from accurate recordings, but from the meanings you assign to your experiences. If remembering something exactly threatens your emotional stability, your mind alters the memory. If a precise recollection feels irrelevant, your mind softens the details. If your current worldview requires a different interpretation, your memory adjusts itself accordingly. In this sense, the past is not a historical archive, it is a psychological tool, constantly carved and polished to support the person you consciously or unconsciously want to be. Even the relationships you remember are reshaped. A friend from childhood may seem kinder now, because you've grown more nostalgic. A person who once hurt you might feel more distant, more faded, as your present self gains resilience. Likewise, someone you once admired might feel less impressive in hindsight because your own growth made their influence seem smaller. These changes do not mean the past is false, they mean the past is responsive. Your mind resculpts it to align with the emotional and intellectual shape of today. Sometimes, this reshaping feels like healing. A painful memory softens as you reinterpret it through maturity. What once wounded you now becomes a lesson. What once felt like betrayal becomes a stepping stone. Your mind takes the jagged edges of old moments and sands them down until they fit comfortably within your story. It feels natural, sometimes even comforting, to believe this new version, and because it fits your identity more seamlessly, your mind accepts it as truth. But reshaping can also distort. A harmless moment can grow into a symbol of failure if your present self is steeped in self-doubt. An old success might feel smaller because your current expectations are higher. You might even rewrite your own capabilities, telling yourself that you were never good enough back then, even if you actually were. This is the dangerous side of memory's fluidity. Your mind can reshape the past, not only to protect you, but also to mirror your insecurities. In this way, the past bends to both your strengths and your weaknesses. Consider how memories shift, depending on your mood. A memory recalled during sadness often becomes tinted with sadness, even if the original moment was joyful. The brain cannot fully separate past from present. The emotional tone of the moment you recall becomes part of the memory itself. So when you revisit that same memory later during a different emotional state, you may feel confused, as if the past contains two contradictory versions. In truth, it wasn't the past that changed. It was you. And each version of you reshaped the memory in its own image. Your mind also reshapes the past to maintain continuity. If your current beliefs contradict who you once were, memory will stretch to align your identity. You may forget your own mistakes or reinterpret them to seem more rational. You might amplify your former successes to justify who you are today, or you might downplay past achievements because the present version of yourself feels undeserving. It is not the past influencing the present, it is the present influencing the past. Your mind edits old scenes to create a smoother narrative, one that feels coherent, even if it is not historically accurate. And yet, despite all of this reshaping, you rarely notice it happening. You trust your memories because they feel vivid. You trust them because they feel real. You trust them because they feel like yours. But ownership does not imply accuracy. The mind is not an archivist, it is an artist. It paints, repaints, reinterprets, and reinvents until the story of your life feels emotionally true, even if it is factually unstable. In the end, your memories are alive. They grow with you. They evolve with you. They change as you change. Every former moment is subject to revision, because memory is not what happened. It is what your mind creates each time you call the past back into the present. Your remembered life is a world continuously reshaped, not by the version of you that lived it, but by the version of you that remembers it now. Memories are not fixed. They are living entities, fluid and unpredictable, endlessly shifting with each act of recall. Every time you remember, you do not access a static record. You summon a reconstruction, a version of the past, filtered, reshaped, and reinterpreted through the lens of who you are now. And each time this reconstruction occurs, the memory is reborn. It is reborn with subtle alterations, with emotional recalibrations, with new details invented to fill gaps. Your brain is constantly rewriting its own history, and with every rewrite, the memory becomes less like what actually happened, and more like what your present self needs it to be. Memories do not remain, they evolve, they reinvent themselves endlessly. This endless reinvention is why you can return to the same event multiple times and experience it differently each time. A conversation that felt innocuous a decade ago may now appear significant, loaded with meaning, because your understanding of relationships and human behavior has changed. A moment of failure may now feel catastrophic or redemptive, depending on the resilience or self-doubt you carry in the present. Even sensory details shift. Colors grow sharper or duller, voices louder or softer, the temperature warmer or colder. The brain is not concerned with historical accuracy. It is concerned with psychological coherence. It molds the memory to serve the ongoing narrative of your life. Every time a memory is recalled, it is reconstructed. Every reconstruction introduces small changes. These changes accumulate over time, until the memory bears little resemblance to the original moment, and yet it feels authentic. The illusion of authenticity is essential. Without it, the past would fracture, identity would destabilize, and the story you tell yourself about your life would collapse. Endless reinvention protects you, but it also deceives you. It makes the mutable permanent, the imagined real, the reconstructed familiar. The process is both intimate and invisible. You do not consciously decide which elements of a memory to alter. Your mind does it automatically, seamlessly. When details are missing, the brain invents them. When emotions were subtle, the brain amplifies or diminishes them according to your current emotional state. When your beliefs or experiences have changed, the brain modifies interpretations to maintain narrative consistency. This is why two people can remember the same event in starkly different ways. Each mind reinvents the memory endlessly to fit its owner's perspective. There is no objective past. There is only memory, endlessly reinvented, endlessly alive. Even memories you thought were concrete, the ones anchored in photographs, diaries, or recordings, are vulnerable. The act of recalling these events can alter your perception of them. You see the image, you read the words, but your brain filters them through an evolving lens. You emphasize some details, ignore others, reinterpret the meaning, and assign new emotional weight. Every engagement with memory leaves a trace of invention, a fingerprint of your present self. In this way, memories are never final. They are a continuous process, a dynamic interplay between past fragments and present needs. This endless reinvention also explains why nostalgia feels simultaneously familiar and strange. You think you remember how it was, but what you are really experiencing is the most recent version of your memory, a version subtly shaped by every recall, every interpretation, every layer of emotion that has accumulated over the years. Nostalgia is never the past. It is the most recent reinvention of it. Your mind creates a version of history that comforts, hurts, or instructs you, depending on what you need at the moment. There is a paradox at the heart of this process. The more vivid a memory feels, the more it may have been altered. Clarity does not equate to truth. Certainty does not equate to fidelity. A memory can feel hyper-real, filled with colors, textures, and sounds, and yet be a composite of fragments, inventions, and reinterpretations. Your mind conflates reconstruction with reality. The more often you recall a memory, the more real it seems, even as it drifts further from the original event. Memories are endlessly reinvented, and your conviction in them grows alongside their distortion. The endless reinvention of memory is not a flaw. It is a feature of consciousness. It allows you to survive, to make sense of your experiences, to integrate lessons, to maintain a coherent identity, but it is also a source of instability. You cannot trust any memory as a permanent truth. You cannot disentangle original events from the inventions layered atop them. The past is a living, breathing entity that changes with every glance, every thought, every act of remembrance. This is why your sense of self is both solid and fluid. You are defined by memories, yet those memories are never fixed. You are anchored in an ever-changing past, an endlessly rewritten history that mirrors the evolving present. Who you were, what you did, what you felt, they are all provisional, reconstructed continuously to sustain the narrative of who you are today. The past reinvents itself endlessly, and in doing so it reinvents you. Memories are not prisons of time. They are laboratories of identity. Each recall is an experiment. Each reconstruction tests and reshapes your understanding of yourself and your world. You can never fully access what was, only what your mind reconstructs. You can never hold the past still, only interact with it in its current, reinvented form. And each interaction adds another layer, another alteration, another version. In the endless reinvention of memory, the past is never fixed. It is alive. It is malleable. It is a reflection of who you are now and who you are becoming. Every memory you hold has been touched by this process, reshaped by your mind, colored by your emotions, filtered through your beliefs. They are endlessly, inevitably, inescapably alive. And in this endless cycle, the past is less a record of what happened than a mirror of who you are at this moment, forever reinvented, forever evolving. As we reach the edge of our exploration, one truth becomes unavoidable. Memory is not a faithful witness to the past. It is not a vault, a recording, a frozen moment in time. Memory is a living force, endlessly reconstructing, reshaping, and reinventing the experiences we think we know. Every thought, every recollection, every feeling we carry is influenced not just by what occurred, but by who we are now, who we have become, and even by who we hope to be. The past, as we understand it, exists only in fragments, fragments continually rewritten to fit the narrative of the present. And with each act of remembering, the past subtly shifts, mutates, and transforms, leaving us both anchored and unmoored in a reality that is constantly in motion. The implications of this are both profound and unsettling. If our memories are not fixed, then the stories we tell ourselves about who we were, what we felt, and what truly happened are provisional, mutable, and subjective. A moment of joy can become tinged with sorrow. A moment of grief can evolve into a lesson of resilience. Each recall is an act of creation. Each remembrance is a reinvention. We are, in effect, authors of our own histories, rewriting them as often as we turn the pages, and yet we rarely perceive the edits. The reconstruction feels seamless, natural, true. This is the genius and the danger of memory. It preserves our sense of continuity, our sense of self, even as it transforms what we think we know. To confront this truth is to confront the fragility of personal history. Nothing you remember exists as it once did. Your childhood, your relationships, your failures, your triumphs, everything has been filtered through layers of interpretation, colored by present emotions, and adjusted to maintain coherence. The past is not objective. It is not a static landscape. It is a living narrative, constantly rewritten by the person you are now. And yet within this flux lies an unexpected freedom. Because memory is flexible, identity is flexible. The self is not rigidly defined by what happened, but by how those events are integrated, reconstructed, and reimagined. We are perpetually crafting the story of our own lives, not merely reliving it. Memory, then, is not a record of what was. It is a reflection of who we are now. And in that reflection, endlessly reinvented, we find both the fragility and the power of the human mind. The past, continuously rewritten, is never lost. It is never fixed. It lives within us, reshaping itself and us, forever. And perhaps that is the ultimate paradox. The more we think we remember, the more we are creating. The past is alive, and we are its ever-evolving authors. Understanding that memory reinvents itself endlessly allows us to approach our past differently. we see that regret, nostalgia, and longing are not absolute truths. They are interpretations, narratives shaped and reshaped over time. We recognize that emotional weight, clarity, and certainty in memory are not proof of accuracy, but evidence of reconstruction. And perhaps most profoundly, we understand that the past is not a prison, it is a canvas. Every fragment, every recollection, every memory, no matter how altered, offers the opportunity to see ourselves anew, to rewrite meaning, and to engage with life in the present with awareness and intentionality.